Hey, so just a quick heads up. My audio for the first 16 minutes of this episode isn't the best. I don't really know what went wrong, but I was able to sort it out afterwards. And after about 60 minutes in, the audio is just normal. Regardless, I hope you enjoy the episode. Edbound was a really good guest, and yeah.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the World of Brickfilms podcast. I'm your host, William of AW Studios. As always, joining with us is my good friend and co-host, Sean Moses of Sillypenta.
Hello, once again.
And our special guest today is Edbound.
Hello! How's everybody doing?
Yeah, pretty good. Yeah, not too bad. How are you?
I'm doing well.
Oh, great. Well, yeah, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, no problem. Thank you very much for having me on the show. Or on the podcast.
I know I made it sound as if this is the end of the episode, but...
It could be either or. Reuse this exact same audio for the end of it.
But yes, thanks for taking some time out of your evidently incredibly busy schedule.
Yes, yeah.
I'm actually very excited to be here. I'm very happy that you guys asked.
One of the things that I find really amazing about you is that, I think for about a year now, isn't it? You've roughly released one brick film a week.
Yeah, it's actually right about that point. I started in May last year, and now it is May of this year.
Wow. Oh, sweet, yeah.
Yeah.
What is always crazy is the quality always remains consistent.
Yeah, I was going to say the same. The animation is good.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
So what's the secret?
Yeah.
I don't think there really is much of a secret. I guess the animation techniques I use particularly, I don't focus much on realistic animation. It's much more cartoonish and exaggerated. And in doing so, you kind of skip a lot of the subtlety, which kind of does help with speeding things along. I would say that doing this style of animation is much faster than doing something like Twick a Brick, for example, because they're much more, their movements are a lot more defined and slower,
Yeah.
but in that same sense, it gives it much more of a sense of realism.
Yeah, I do feel kind of want to say you can get away with things by doing large cartoony movements, but not in a bad way, because
Pretty
it's,
much.
it's a good style.
You can go with one or the other. This style does lend itself much more to being able to be produced much more quickly.
Yeah, that's the kind of the sort of trick, I guess, of cartoony animation is. I mean, it looks really appealing, but you can get away with being kind of imperfect in with particular frames, and it just kind of works.
Yeah, and I like that. I like that about it too.
Yeah.
I think I love the realism style that a lot of other brick filmers go for. And sometimes I even think how could I probably do this myself? But I also really like how much the Lego aesthetic itself really lends itself to the cartoonish style as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's quite nice to see how there isn't much articulation with them, but you can make them very fluid and you can have so much movement within them. And I think it's really cool to see. It's quite that's seeing that kind of cartoony kind of style. And I think as well, when you're thinking about the style of animation that you want to pick for a brick film, you have to have that kind of intent of, is it a more kind of humorous brick film, or if it's more of a serious brick film? You have to have a certain style, and I think that kind of what a lot of people consider smooth kind of very kind of subtle animation doesn't necessarily work in a more comedic kind of brick film.
Yeah, I feel especially when you're doing things like comedy, you have to really think about the visuals as well, because that's pretty much half the battle.
Yeah.
When you're delivering a joke or something, you have to make sure what the audience is seeing is also, not only are they visually stimulated, but it's also funny. And I think when you do the cartoonish movements, when they're really fast or quick paced, then it really lends itself to that.
Yeah, especially when
absolutely.
it ties in nicely with good voice acting.
That's also one of the reasons why I also try and go for the crazy sort of movements, is because when you have an emphasis in the voice acting on a particular word, you want to also portray the character. You want to make sure the character is also acting.
Yeah.
And
it's more important to have character to how they move. That's more important than just smoothness.
Although smoothness, I think all of these have their place.
Of course, yeah. But a lot of the time, people's only compliment to animation is just, oh, it's smooth. But you can do something that's smooth but entirely robotic, whereas it's better to have some character.
I think that's something that we've sort of touched on in the past, with brick films, is that there can be an emphasis too much on one particular element, and the kind of smoothness and the easing in and out is only kind of one of those elements.
Yes. It's when you have just easing in and out, that's very important as well. But you also have to make sure that, like, there's a purpose to each of these movements as well. There needs to be sort of an expression or an emotion that you want your character to convey within these movements.
I know I was very inspired by Mind Games dialogue animation to see that you could have emphasis on just certain words or certain inflections, really down to minute details. So I like trying to do that.
I love doing that. I love like having like a character do like a stutter and being able to animate that as well.
Yeah.
Just have them like move their head back and forth or swing their neck. It's just like when you have a character who's like really looking for what to say. I love being able to sort of animate the panic in them.
Yeah, I get that. I mean, I was trying to do that a bit with the last brick film that I did. I took part in Mind Games Quarantine Days.
Oh, Quarantine Days.
Yeah. And
wait, I saw your entry actually.
Oh yeah, cool.
I enjoyed it.
Oh, thank you. I mean, I know it's basically what you did before.
There's no way anybody could have known. And the thing is, I get a lot of like people saying, "Can I do this?" or "Can I do that?" or "We'll be copying you." And it's like you can pretty much do whatever you want. There's no one concrete idea that belongs to somebody. I mean, at the end of the day, I'm technically ripping off all these people who draw comic books with the Spider-Man characters and stuff. Even if it's a similar idea to somebody else, there's no way you can make it exactly the same because your own unique take on it is what makes it unique. It's important for people to remember that. Which is why I really liked yours as well.
Oh, thank you.
But I can confirm I got the script for it before yours came out.
Yeah.
No worries. There's no accusations here.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did want to confirm that there wasn't any whipping off. Yeah, with that, I kind of wanted to go for more of a cartoony style. I think I actually looked at the way that Benny and Lee is animated, Penta. Like, I was kind of going for that kind of style a bit, because I don't really make a lot of brick films which are kind of comedic that way. So it was kind of a fun experiment just to kind of like have constant movement.
Oh yeah, I really like constant movement, especially recently. I've been trying to have, if a character starts saying a line, they don't stop moving until they're finished with the line. You'll see that in the history video I just released.
I did see that, yeah. I mean, I do like that a lot. And I think it's like, one thing that I noticed that some people do is they'll animate like one thing a lot and it kind of just gets very repetitive. Like, I remember seeing a brick film where the only thing that was like constantly moving were the hands, and they'd like rotate like 360 degrees, and it just got really sort of distracting,
Oh, just constantly just like motoring.
Yeah.
Oh man, it's like a whisk.
Yeah, they're just sort of like
just moving.
They're kind of like defying the laws of the human anatomy and physics.
But it's funny that you mentioned that though, because I've kind of taken to animating the characters leaning back and forward a lot, and
I've been doing that too.
Yeah, and I try not to have the arms go up a lot because it's kind of weird, like it's unnatural. Like people, I mean, I know people talk with their hands, but like they don't just throw their arms up straight up and down all the time. So I feel like leaning kind of looks a bit more natural, like they're actually people, and I just put the arms up for real emphasis.
Yeah, when you have Lego, there's not much you can really like do with the minifigures themselves. So,
did you find as well though, like there's some situations where if you're doing a walk cycle, you don't necessarily want to move their arms at the same time, because I don't think everybody always does that kind of marching kind of look, And that's one of the things I found, like if you want to make a character kind of like pace up and down a room, they're probably not going to actually move their arms.
Well, that's another thing that personally I've been getting into recently, is trying to animate walks without using cycles and trying to imagine what fits the character and the circumstances best.
Yeah, I mean that's one of the things that I've started doing now with Edbound episode 6. I've tried to add more like that kind of the 6 frame walk cycle. I think that works better for that kind of like kind of a slow walk, because I always think that 4 frames, the classic 4 frame like walk cycle, is just too fast.
Yeah, but it does have a nice sort of goofy Lego look to it.
Yeah, again, it works for that kind of cartoony style, I think.
Mm-hmm. I think like when it comes to like walk cycles in general, it's weird because sometimes they can work and sometimes just don't. they can look odd. Even though you're pretty much doing nothing different from previous, from previous walk cycles. It's just, it can be strange.
Well, that's the thing.
Yeah.
Like, that's why I want to get away from having these like rigid cycles in mind, because I feel like I want to animate it like I'd animate anything else, and just think like, what's the next frame supposed to be to convey the movement the way I want it to look, rather than just thinking, frame 1, leg forward, frame 2. Between the studs, frame 3, leg down.
I think with walking, there's not really much you can actually do to convey character, because Legos don't have much to do. But running is a whole different game. That's like, running is like, there are so many runs out there. It's crazy.
One of the things I do like to do, I like the walk and talk, where they move their arms as if they're talking whilst walking. That's quite cool.
That's fun. And like they're swinging them up and down, and like even having the body lean forward a bit while they're walking.
I mean, with that, you do generally have to have like some way to rig it, like have some tack, because they otherwise they'll just fall over. But I do like that look a lot.
Sticky tack is strange to me. I don't like the way it can sometimes stain the Lego. Or maybe that's just an issue with the tack I'm using.
I was just gonna say, maybe like that doesn't happen to me. So.
Oh really? Oh. Maybe I should get some different ones.
Do you not use tack much?
I use it when I know I have to. Like, for example, when the characters are like Naruto running or something, and they have to be leaning forward, then yes, I will try to like stick with the same color that their legs are to like hide it better. But I find it can be just somewhat of a hassle, just because sometimes it doesn't stick right, or sometimes it hits the wrong spot, or it just falls over anyways.
I feel like different colours of tack are greasier and have a strange consistency to them. And I've only ever really liked the classic blue tack. Something that I've seen, I think Mighty Wanderer do, is just put the entire torso on just a big mound of tack with no legs whatsoever and get really subtle movements with it. But actually, something I wanted to ask was, you've got a lot of camera movements in your films. And so what's your rig for that?
It's really just my webcam, the C920. And that's it.
Oh, nice.
Okay.
You're one of the C920 crew as well.
Yeah.
I like it because it's so small. So,
Yeah.
I don't have a lot of space myself already. And when you're building indoor sets, particularly, it can be kind of like difficult to get like a huge camera in some of the tighter spaces. When I used to use my DSLR, that was a problem, especially. But with a smaller camera, it's just much easier to sort of move it around and get it in some interesting places, even if you do lose visual quality.
I just love how easily you can do camera movements with the C920. It's just sort of it's really perfect for like that kind of
the
thing.
style,
I think
for
if
sure,
you, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it really benefits.
Yeah, moving the camera goes a long way to keeping the visuals alive.
Yeah, it's just important to just have a constant stream of movement. Just because I find, particularly myself, when I'm watching brick films, if there's not much going on in terms of pacing, it can be easy to lose an audience member.
Yeah, I mean, I generally try and focus mostly when it comes to like influence on live action films, because generally most films don't actually have a whole lot of just sort of static shots, because it can be quite boring. So a lot of films rely heavily on camera movement to add something visually interesting,
but done in a good enough way that you don't even register it unless you're looking for it.
Yeah,
one thing I really like is like the handheld camera kind of look you see in a lot of, especially in modern TV shows like Brooklyn Nine-Nine or like a mockumentary. I think that works much better for comedy, and a static sort of like tripod shots work a lot better for more like avant-garde things. Did I use that term correctly? Let me just Google it. I don't know what I just said.
I think that sounds right. Yeah, I mean,
let's just say art.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
more of like a dramatic film.
But actually, you mentioned that you used a DSLR previously, and something that something I was kind of meaning to bring up, but I guess it doesn't. I guess it's been fixed. But for some reason, up until recently, your films were stretched horizontally. It always bugged me.
It's not something I particularly noticed until I stopped doing it, and now I can't go back and watch some of the older ones either, because this was like at a time where I didn't really expect these to get like crazy or like critiqued or anything. So I kind of just slapped them in After Effects and stretched them out without really caring about the aspect ratio too much.
So you were filming them in 4:3?
I think it was 4:3 at the time. Either that or I simply just tried to fit the entire frame in the frame, or like fit the entire shot in the frame, without really caring much for how it actually looked. But after that, I stopped doing that, and I just said, you know what? Let's just remember the fact that there's going to be some area of the frame that will be cropped out because of the way it's going to look, or because of the way it's going to be, aspect ratioed, and I'll just work within that limit.
Yeah.
And then I stopped stretching it out, and I just started, cutting off the corners of the frame instead. Something
that I was curious about is that, so your YouTube channel is rather recent. The only uploads are going back to like mid 2018, I think. But I know that you were doing stuff before then. So do you have any older YouTube channels?
Oh man.
The forbidden question.
Yeah. Yeah, I do. From when I was like around 10, when I was 9, 10, 11, I had a channel called Krikeen, Krikeen. All the videos are still up there if you really want to see them, but I do not recommend it. I cannot go back and watch them.
Well, you already know that I will.
No, it's fine. It's important to also recognize that a lot of stuff doesn't happen overnight either. So a lot of these videos date back all the way like to 2009, 2010. About 10 years ago. And I know that's not much, considering you've covered brickfilmers who've been doing this for like 30 years now.
Well, I mean, it's quite rare for people to be around for over 10 years.
Yeah, I was also going to say, I stopped when I was about high school, because I was like, well, I'm in high school now, I'm too old for Legos, haha. But that's kind of a foolish, not really foolish, it's like the exact kind of mentality you expect a person in high school to have when they're kind of like, self-conscious about how people may perceive them or this or that. But then you kind of like get out of that, and you kind of like, wait, that meant that whole 4 years I just lived don't really mean much now. I mean, sure, it was vital to the development as a human being, but everybody else in that sort of circle that I saw every day, I don't see anymore at all. So there should have never been anything to fear, is essentially what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get what you mean.
But it's hard to get out of that mindset when you're in high school, man. Because that's like, or like when you're in school in general, because you see the same people every day. It's pretty much like, it's almost like inescapable. But when you're out of it, it feels so small. It's crazy.
Yeah, I've got a similar sort of story where, I mean, I never fully stopped brickfilming, but I've got like a couple of years where I look back on it now and I feel like, why didn't I make anything? I've got nothing to show for these years.
It's a sad reality.
Yeah.
It's kind of funny for me. When I started university a couple of years ago, there was a phase where I was kind of like really worried about like my I guess image, I suppose it would be the right word, and it's kind of like you worry about people finding out about like, oh, you do all these brick films and stuff, but when you get to that sort of level, you get to like college or university, it's kind of like people don't actually mind. They think it's cool.
Yeah, it's a very weird how it gets flipped up on its head.
Yeah, but it's
like, I'm in the same, like, people who I thought would have made fun of me back in the day are like, hey, this is cool. I'm like, why couldn't you say this earlier, dog? But thank you.
It's usually better to sort of just say that you're a stop motion animator before you mention that you do it with Lego.
Yeah, that's also a good point.
And then once you show them what you do, they won't think about the Lego side of it. They'll look at the fact that it's actually really cool.
It's strange how, Lego as a product doesn't really seem like it's confined to a single age group or anything. It's just, I guess, marketing, right? It kind of like gives people a perception.
Nowadays, I think it's as much of a thing for adults as it is for children. Like, you've got the AFOL community.
Yeah. So, I mean, at this point, everything is for adults.
They've certainly tried to do a lot more direct marketing to adults recently.
That's cool. I like that. Yeah.
But
I'm still waiting for the Breaking Bad theme.
The Breaking Bad Legos. They adapted some R-rated movie scenes, didn't they, already? To Lego?
I imagine that would be a bit of a cut-off for them. but PG-13 for sure.
I mean, Jurassic Park is like probably, I don't want to say that's the closest they've gotten, but Jurassic Park is pretty violent for a Lego thing.
Yeah, but it's
Like
one of
Lego
those movies that's kind of in that weird like gray area where even though it's violent, it's still recognized as like a family movie.
It's like a PG-13, isn't it? It's a bit like the Indiana Jones movies. They kind of just downplay the whole kind of like the adult side of it a bit more to make it more kid-friendly when it comes to the actual marketing of like Lego and stuff.
That makes sense. But when you look deeper into it, with like especially the Indiana Jones line, because I forgot about that. But the Indiana Jones movies, like they had Nazis in them. That's about as crazy dark as you can get.
Yeah, that's true.
And Lego was like, "Hey yo, check this out."
But you know, like when people were suggesting that they make Lego Star Wars, there was people high up in Lego who said they'd never do that because it was wars. You know, there was like guns and stuff.
Yes. Makes sense.
Yeah.
But it's also, I think it's like in that weird reality in which we kind of know we're not going to experience that, at least not in our lifetimes. So we're not really scared of it.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
it's such a funny story now though, because like Lego Star Wars basically kept them afloat while they were losing a load of money.
Yeah. Thank you, Lego Star Wars, I suppose.
But I was kind of surprised by Lego Overwatch.
Oh, that is a good point. Yeah, that's a very, video games in general is something that I feel like Lego should really take much more advantage of.
Yeah,
It's funny. I'm now trying to think like in my head now, like what kind of themes, because there must be a theme of some sort which is more adult. But I'm just trying to think. I mean, Stranger Things is actually quite.
Oh yeah,
that's true.
it's like just like hidden side, but for adults.
Yeah.
But so if you were brick filming in 2009, I'm guessing you must have been seeing some either some classics or some
Just
or
say
some not
it,
so
just
classics.
say it, bro.
So like, what kind of stuff?
They were all 1000% Forest Fire ripoffs. There's no way around it. Like,
Well, you and like 100,000 others.
I mean, like, you know, when you're starting out, you're still kind of like looking for an identity. You're not really looking. You're just kind of like, you know, trying to see what works, or you're imitating what you like because you like
Oh
it.
yeah. Yeah, I think we've all imitated stuff over the years.
I think that's also like true when you get to like any level of filmmaking at all or storytelling. Is at any point you're doing an imitation of what you've seen before and what you definitely enjoy yourself, but you have such a like you've refined it to the point where you can call it your staple.
Yeah, you could. Yeah, you can see the influence, but it's not just a rip off.
Yeah, it's like you're genuinely adding new ingredients to the table.
I do generally believe that when it comes to people starting, whether it would be just like brick films or just films in general, people's sort of interest going into it is the style of someone. It's that kind of, that's what they want to kind of like do. They're inspired by like the style of a certain film or a certain filmmaker, and they want to kind of mimic that before they actually kind of develop what their actual style is, I guess, if that makes sense.
Yes. Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. I think the way I see it is like when you see like a sick movie when you're a kid, and you're like, oh my god, I want to see it again, but there's no way to see it again because it's like 2007, the internet's not really a thing yet, so you just kind of film, like, you know, like with whatever toys you have, you film the scene you just saw, so you can try and rewatch it over and over again, but it has like your flavor to it, which makes it that much more appealing to you as the creator.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, considering the amount of like Star Wars recreations over the years and people doing full movie recreations occasionally.
Full movie recreations.
When
are we going to see Killer Bean Forever?
I'm sure there's a couple.
See,
of
that
people.
would be something.
That'll be the next Brick Film Day community project.
Can you
Killer
imagine?
Bean
Because that was made by
reanimated.
one person. Oh man, the Killer Bean collab.
Imagine though, it would actually be kind of cool if, you know, like this like Shrek reanimated. What if Brick Filmers did the Lego Movie reanimated, and not to the same,
That would be-
not to the
wait.
same standard. Like everyone does it to their own, you know, standard. So you don't have to like build the big sets and all.
Nothing crazy, just pure like homemade.
Yeah,
filmmaking.
yeah, just like how Shrek reanimated. You know, it bounces all over the place.
Shrek Retold was a classic. The moment I saw the opening and the dude's like on the ukulele
Oh,
singing
yeah.
the acoustic version of All Star, I was like, I know this is something else.
I know that they're actually aren't they trying to develop Shrek 2.
You mean Shrek?
The best one.
Oh, they're redoing Shrek 2? I didn't know that.
I think so, yeah.
Can't wait for the ending, the I Need a Hero scene. See
Yeah.
how they do that. That scene is a bona fide classic. It's crazy how much I've rewatched that scene.
Shrek 2 is a good soundtrack.
Everything about it. Shrek 2 is a good movie.
Yeah,
I feel
yeah,
like
it
people
is.
say that as a meme, but Shrek 2 is a great movie.
Maybe it's become more of a meme in recent years, but like people used to always cite Shrek 2 as a great sequel years ago.
It is an amazing movie. And I know it's like, I think it's like people say that with genuinity, but they also like say it like for the meme as well.
Yeah.
I think
but
it's
incredible.
Like, there were certain films and things which are memed, but out of the love of the thing. Like, I think Shrek is one of those. I think
Yes, and like SpongeBob.
Yeah, SpongeBob's a prime example of that as well. It's like, yeah, that people meme it for the affection rather than like, I don't know, Shark Tale.
Shark Tale, nobody loves Shark Tale. People make fun of that.
So I suppose another good question to follow on from talking about the early years would be how did you get back into brick filming? Was it through your own decision, or did you see other stuff and get back into it?
So at that point, I was really just into just like making videos. Like in high school, although I stopped brick filming, I didn't really stop making videos in general. I would make like Let's Plays and stuff. And then later on in high school, I was in my media arts class, and every week we would like, put on a show for the entire school to see on the TVs. And that was sick because we essentially, like we had to say something, like our teacher would be like, okay, you have to do like, it's Earth Day, you got to make something for Earth Day. But within that restriction, we pretty much could do whatever we want. And I remember there was one for like, we made a video for littering, and it was like, this guy was littering around the school. So a couple of guys literally just go like on a police chase against him, and there was like lasers flying everywhere, and then like people were talking about it after class, and I'm like, this is sick. And then I went to film school after that because I was like really into video making at that point. And film school was nothing like media arts class. Media arts class was the Chad, and film school was not the Chad. It was 2 hours away every day, and I had to bus there. So for an 8 a.m. class, I had to wake up at 5 a.m. And it was like all theory. It was mostly theory, but it wasn't even theory that I wanted to know. It was like this is what. What's it called? I can't even remember what it's called. It's called transmedia or whatever. There'd be like a 3-hour lecture of a professor explaining what happened during the Dark Knight press release tour. And I'm like, I do not care about this. And I'm like, why are you showing me YouTube videos? Why am I coming all the way from my suburban town to your suburban town that's 3 hours away, 2 hours away? So you could show me YouTube videos on the big screen, or you can go on nofilmschool.com and give me readings from that website. I'm paying $10,000 a year for this, and I wasn't really making stuff, because everybody lived in that town, and I lived in not that town. I had to, bus here and there. So if I wanted to make stuff, I'd have to like sign out the equipment, and take it all the way home. And carrying around like a huge like $3,000, $4,000 worth of equipment on the bus around like 8 p.m., 9 p.m. to my small town. I'm a skinny guy, so I'm not taking on anyone in a fight. So that was not an option for me. So when I was like really feeling creatively starved, when I haven't really made something I wanted to make in a while, I decided to bust out my old Legos, and I was like, what can I make with these? I have some experience with them, and I slowly started getting back into stop motion, sort of making things out of the frustration that I felt while being in film school, as well as getting more into claymation and stuff. And around the time they started getting popular is around the time I started getting really fed up with film school. And I was like, I am tired of this. I feel like I'm wasting so much money on food, on the bus, on just not really learning anything that I didn't already know or that I couldn't find on my own online for free. And that was the biggest issue with it. Although I love the people there, quite a few good friends, it just wasn't worth $40,000 of debt that I didn't even know how I was going to clear up.
Yeah.
Once I noticed the YouTube channel started getting more and more steam, I was like, maybe I can do something with this, and kind of have my cake and eat it too, and jump ship from film school, and that's pretty much how I got back into brick filming.
And you certainly were successful. You blew up fast.
I want to say it was like definitely luck, but that first initial spark where the Solid Snake is Dummy Thick video, when that kind of got popular, that's when I figured, how can I take this and make sure I don't lose the momentum. And that's, when you get into the whole uploading every week, which also helps because I find myself having a low attention span for projects. If I find myself working on something for too long, I find myself starting to get burned out by it. So having something fresh every week also really helps keeping like, you know, my mind stimulated and active.
Yeah, I think that's a good point actually. Yeah, I know that I made the Lego Studios history video that I just made. That was all basically like all over the last couple of months. I mean, I've been working on it like slowly for years, but then really edited the video all in one go. And it would probably have taken so much longer if I'd taken a break and then come back to it and thought like, oh, there's still so much to do. But the way I did it, I had no time to stop and think about it.
But it's a good video, man. It's really enjoyable, really good to watch. The narration's like solid and so engaging.
I do want to say, because I want to talk about the video in like great length, but before we actually do, I just wanted to reiterate on what you were just saying a minute ago about the whole like film school thing. I mean, actually, as of today, I've literally just finished the second year of my film school. And,
man.
God, the stuff that you said really hit home.
I don't want to be like this whole film school doesn't work for anybody kind of person, because it does. It can definitely work for you if you're in the right spot. But for me, personally, it was like everything was going against me because I didn't have really money to live near there, and I didn't really have because I had to work back at home, and I didn't really have connections either. Like, something I noticed about the people around me is that these people were like, I don't want to say rich, but like they were definitely of a higher social economic class, and it felt like they got everything just a little bit easier, which kind of gave me a chip on the shoulder too. Although it's not their fault, you know, I don't blame them as the person. It's just it's kind of like demoralizing to see people get like, you know, work nearly half as hard as you do but get twice the opportunities.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I kind of find kind of frustrating, like with my course, is that there is a lot of like, as you said, like theory, and there's a lot of classes where it's mostly just kind of watching clips on YouTube, and it's like, and it's stuff like, a lot of it is not stuff which is hugely that complex, but also as well, it kind of feels like they just don't know how to actually teach, and it's kind of just like, I don't know, a lot of the time I don't feel like we're actually making that many films, and the frustrating thing this semester was that you know, you've had all of that kind of a couple of years now of like kind of learning like your craft, and like when it comes to like I'm really into cinematography, so I've kind of learned the inside and outs of like the camera and stuff, and I was really like looking forward to being like the cinematographer, and there was this project which I was really looking forward to doing, and then COVID-19 comes along, and then everything's cancelled.
But yeah, that sucks, because like I do feel like the best way to learn is to make stuff.
Exactly, that's what I felt too.
And so
I feel the best way to learn is to really get into it.
Yeah, like every new project I make, I feel like
you just get better and better.
Just get better.
You learn things. Yeah.
You practically don't even have to like consciously think about it, but you accidentally learn stuff. You compare
the stuff you made earlier to the stuff you're making now, and think, well, I did this better, or like I could do that better next time.
I mean, there was a whole kind of like, at least the first year of university, where I'd made a lot of brick films, which I was really proud of. And then I would be making these films, and you know, you're with people who aren't like hugely that experienced, and you're not particularly that experienced on the live action side of things, and on the specific like craft, and it's kind of just like, I don't feel like I'm proving myself, but there's so many films out there where I feel like I have, but I just would rather be making them right now, you know.
It's true. Like, the thing about, I think the biggest issue with film school is that it's so lenient on the school side of it, but at the end of the day, I don't think people say that it's mostly useful for finding connections in the industry, but that's also another issue I felt, is that I don't think I want to be in the industry. I don't like the bureaucracy, you know, all the politics that go into it, although real world politics is a whole different matter. But like, the thing about the film industry is that at the end of the day, it's a business to and that really can kill a lot of motivation and creativity.
Yeah.
They are quite like, I think there's one of our tutors who's like to do with producing. He says there are like two types of films. There is the kind of the creative projects which, you know, people want to actually make, and then there's the products. And I think that
you have to make.
Yeah, I think the vast majority of films that you see like being like the Hollywood films generally are products.
That's
first.
kind of the point.
Yeah.
They fund those art house projects.
Yeah.
But even getting to work on those, like the things you want to make, it's kind of it can be kind of tough. Just because like sometimes sometimes studios won't let you do a certain thing, or you won't have as much control as you would like. And when it comes to like what you're creating, it can be kind of like just kind of difficult to work around all the red tape.
Yeah, even on a small scale level, like previously, I'd considered entering some of the like Lego the Rebrick contests, but I just completely lost any will to enter because like you were just trying to make an idea that fit to all these external guidelines and what you think somebody else wants.
That's exactly what it is. Yeah. When I like handed in assignments in film school and I got you get the rubric back, it's like everybody felt this, but it's like, who are we making this for? Are we making this because we want to make something good, or are we making something for the teacher's standards?
Well, that's
and
the
a lot
thing
of us found like
That's the thing as well. It's like one of the things like you go through several seminars and you're developing your story and you feel that you're happy with the story that you've developed with your group, and then you've got like the tutor kind of like completely breaking it apart and saying that it should be X, Y, and Z, and it kind of just like it kind of it lowers your confidence in your creativity, but also it kind of feels like you're making their film rather than your own.
exactly.
It's just kind of like, I don't know. It's just at the same time they kind of criticize you for kind of like doing exactly what they say.
That also is like so tricky too. It's like, you told me to do it like this. Why am I like losing marks? Why am I more concerned about the grade rather than what I'm actually producing?
Yeah, I know it's.
But when you mentioned your old username there, and I thought it sounded remarkably familiar for some reason, and I just I searched it on the wiki.
Oh my god! If you get this, oh my god!
And did you enter the 24-hour animation contest 8?
Oh yeah, I did. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was which one was that?
2010.
10? I was 11.
And so the film, The Ambition of One.
Ambition. This is before I watched Breaking Bad, actually, so you can't say it's a ripoff of Breaking Bad.
Well, I can't see it at all. It's missing, apparently.
Oh, it is? It is on YouTube.
Well, maybe it's blocked for copyright or something.
No, I think what happened was at some point I was embarrassed, and I privated them all, so nobody could ever like see them and make fun of me. But then I was like, a few years later I'm like,
oh yeah, it is there.
Yeah. Let me just undo all that.
Okay. Because it was on my list. It was listed as missing because I collect all the tech.
Maybe
entries.
that's why I'm missing, because it was privated.
Well, that's
for a few years.
+1 for my tech collection.
I love how like the podcast, it does this kind of thing,
That's true.
It's not a great addition, mind you, but I was 11.
But yeah, I guess we were just about to start talking about the Lego Studios film that you just released, Penta.
Certainly did.
So was that like did it take about a year to make?
Well, yeah, I guess. I mean, I wasn't really like working on it a lot last year. I was doing Tiger Trouble 2 stuff and playing Minecraft, as we all were.
Virtual Legos. We're gonna get the Minecraft in Minecraft BRICKFILM.
But the David Pagano interview was from like earlier last year, so I was doing stuff for the video. And the funny thing is that like earlier this year, like in January or February or something, I was talking with David Pagano again, and I was saying like, okay, I've got the edit coming along now, and I'd like to have a section on A Day at the Races, his coolest home video contest entry. So I asked him if he could get the full film, and he said, oh yeah, I'll just go to my parents' house and get it. And then like, shortly after that, everything went crazy and New York is on lockdown.
Oh,
so that was the end of that.
So he couldn't wait. Was he able to get it?
No, not yet. But I had like 3 shots from it that I could show. So I basically had to work around only having a tiny amount to use.
I was going to actually ask that, because in the interview he says that he hasn't seen it, and I was thinking, but you do actually have it.
Yeah, well,
I was wondering if you actually...
there was a tape sent to the finalists of the contest that had the winners in full and the other 47 finalists, like just a very brief snippet of all of them, and he had transferred that one and sent it to me, so I had a tiny bit of his film and a tiny bit of everyone else's film. And the funny thing is, his film is one of the ones that they showed the least of. Like, some of them have a really a healthy number of shots, but his one was only there for a split second, so I had barely anything to use.
Oh man, that's gotta sting just a bit, you know.
Yeah, I certainly was trolled by that big time, but you know, it'll make when he does get the full film and hopefully puts it up online, it'll be all the more interesting.
If only they knew how big David Pagano would be.
And then that's the same story for this Lego Studios contest. The 9 finalists were sent a tape that had all the finalist films in full, and so I got to transfer that, and that's how I got the contest winners and finalists, because before that only 2 of the 9 finalists were online and none of the winners were available.
My god, this is actually like a public service.
And also, tracking down the tape was like, it was an absolute bitch. I was after that for years, like, no joke. I was, like, you know, found a couple of finalists who had it, and I'd just be contacting them like every 6 months or something, like, I'm still waiting for the tape, please send it.
The catharsis you must have felt getting those tapes.
Oh my god, yeah, it was insane. And the funny thing was, like, I got it eventually from David Pagano, and like shortly after that I got it from Eric Sturpey, who was one of the contest winners, who I'd been you know, contacting for like over a year, and he was like, oh, you know, I just moved house.
You'll never guess what I found.
No, yeah, but I contacted him first when he just so happened to be on his way to his parents' house, and which is like insanely good timing, because he took all of these pictures of a bunch of documents and things related to the contest that are in the video. You know, like there's screen caps of the website from the time, and like a screening list for the Backyard Festival, which, you know, only people who were there would have had that. So it was insanely lucky that I managed to contact him when I did. But he brought the tape from his parents' house back to his house, but then at some point moved house, and like, it, you know, it was always just seemed to be bad timing. But eventually, of course, I got the tape twice.
Vindication at last.
Yeah.
I mean, there's one of the things I find quite interesting. I think when you're kind of like digging through and trying to find like information, there's also like certain contests that hardly anyone actually knew happened, and they're like, I think there's the one in Singapore.
Yeah, the Singapore one was insane. I had no idea about that, because the studio's website had all the winners for the various contests, but I can't remember. I don't think the Singapore ones didn't say like what they were for, so I had no idea why they were there. Like, I just assumed they must have been just a small handful of other entries to the studios contest that they put there for some reason. So then eventually, when I discovered the Singapore contest, and like it put those ones that had been on archives of the website in context, that was a good moment.
Fitting this, like, you know, the jigsaw pieces together, isn't it?
And there's seemingly only one live source online that mentions the Singapore contest, so it's super lucky.
Wow.
Tracking all that down, it has to be like some sort of like detective work.
I do feel like, there's a certain set of skills involved that you could transfer over into something else.
It's like the Liam Neeson speech, but just with like...
Yeah, I don't know who you are, but I will find your brick films.
And I'll post them online.
It must be the Irish side of brick filming.
But then, of course, basically, like, some of the crown jewels of the video are having the information as to who made Dino Cop and the CD films, which, you know, for like close to 2 decades, people in brick filming have been wondering who made these.
I was actually going to ask, like, how did you come across like the people that like created Dino Cop and stuff? What was the sort of like process of getting into contact with them?
Insanely great difficulty. And the two of them, like, they had no overlap, so they were each two different long searches. You know, I'd just be trying to Google any possible combination of anything, and I'd email anybody I could possibly think of. Like, you know, if anybody was on LinkedIn listed as like Lego Audiovisual or whatever, I'd try them, or emailing people of Lego Systems America because I knew the Dino Cop ad was American specifically. And, you know, they all said, I've got no idea.
Oh, man.
I don't know anything about this. Or they'd say, like, oh, it's probably Reckless Abandoned Studios who did these other things for Lego. They did these, like, VHS tapes, The Big Nana Bird and the Wheelersville Moo Cow Mystery, these, like, Duplo and 4+ stop-motion films. But, of course, it wasn't them. But it was good information to get anyway. But, yeah, the funny thing about the CD films like Jewel Quest and Jurassic Park and stuff is that I managed to track down one person who remembered that the films were made in Denmark, but that's like pretty much the only information they had. And so, you know, I'd try searching Denmark animation studios and looking at their websites and looking at archives, and it just seemed to lead nowhere. And I was trying this for ages in as many possible combinations as I could think of, and then eventually I just decided, like, Denmark's a pretty small country and stop motion is pretty niche, so like how many professional stop motion animators can there be in Denmark? So I just decided, I definitely thought it would not work, but I put into Google stop motion animator Denmark, and I just clicked on someone's portfolio website and put it into archive.org, and that's how I found the Bastrup BRICKFILM lead. Their website mentioned that they were an animator for the films and animated them at Bastrup BRICKFILM.
Sometimes it's just a hunch, you know. But it's crazy how much, like, no matter what, like, type of leads you get, at the end of the day, it can just be something completely arbitrary.
Yeah, but I mean, I had to get the lead that it was Denmark to be able to do that, so it was worth, you know, contacting everyone.
You never know where it leads to.
Yeah, and you have to try everything, even if it sounds stupid.
Oh man.
Huh. I mean, it just reminds me so much of these stories you hear about, like, because I really am, I'm obsessed with, like, lost media and that kind of stuff. Those sort of cases I always find really fascinating. And, you know, you see stuff on YouTube about, like, the journeys people have had to make to kind of, like, you know, go through the internet and dig through and try and find, like, contacts and stuff.
The Clock King. That's one famous piece of lost media.
That kind of thing I always find is really fascinating. Like, this idea that there's, like, some sort of, you know, something that was on TV that a couple of people can remember, and it's like, oh yeah, you just try and find, like, someone that has a copy of it. You know, it's just, I find that stuff really fascinating.
It's like, they're like ghost stories, you know. It's like, do they exist? Do they not? It's like, it's incredible.
And another one that I got only in, like, the last month or two was a bunch of the films that were on the Lego Studios website that were user submitted, because most of them were missing, and I'd been, you know, hunting for years trying to scrape together a few more of them. I think we started with like 2 located and managed to get 4 of them, but then eventually I managed to get in contact with the creative director of the website, and I was like, I know this is an absolute long shot, but is there any chance that you still have the film files from the website from back then? And he had a large number of them, and most of the missing ones, almost all of them in fact.
Well,
so it's pretty incredible.
I wonder if there'll ever be, like, these cases of, like, you know, the BRICKFILM creepypastas.
But then, of course, the funny thing is they only appear in the video for like 1 second each, but, like, I'm very happy to know that they're all in there.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's just crazy. I think it's quite mad, like, how, you know, this is like 20 years ago now.
Yeah.
It's like, you know, not that long ago you kind of just thought of it as being like, oh, you know, like 10, 15 years ago, that's hardly anything. But, like, now it's like a huge part of, it's like a huge part of history. And it's kind of like there are so many people, like, you know, the current and sort of next phase of brick filmers who
weren't even born then.
Yeah, it's just crazy.
Yeah, and, like, it's really getting to the point where, yeah, like, now it's properly old to the point where you wouldn't expect people to still have their files.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because, like, when you think about, like, the previous episodes you've done about, like, the 70s to the 90s, you know, it's what you consider like the primitive sort of prehistory of
Prehistory.
brickfilming.
Yeah, that's what I
I
call
really
it.
like that term.
You kind of think of everything after that as being kind of more recent, but in reality, the Lego Studios era is now a really long time ago too. And I think one of the things that I think you can easily kind of lump the Lego Studios era with the brickfilms.com era as almost like one thing, because they do kind of intertwine, but it is actually a very different era, really.
Mm-hmm.
Even though it's a very short-lived era, it's definitely an era in its own right.
Well, the thing is, like, yeah, with studios, there was a lot of people who weren't posting their stuff online, making stuff with studios. And then, you see some of them appear online later, like Coovers or Nathan Wells. So yeah, it's an entirely different crowd. And that was actually something that I really wanted to do with the video, is to not just rely on, like, having the old brickfilms.com directory films. I wanted to make sure that, like, total randomers are represented, like people who weren't ever known names, who weren't ever part of the community. Because, that's very important.
Get the whole history in there.
It's important to the history of studios.
It's interesting to see just how, like, how big and sprawling the history of brickfilms really is. It's like a whole complete other world that a lot of people just don't even like know.
Yeah, and I think it's important to document it all and to let it have a storied history. Because, maybe people would...
It's lore.
Maybe people would aspire to make something great enough that it might be, documented as part of the history in years to come.
We're going through a historic event right now.
Well, yeah.
I mean, like, I feel like there is actually, a lot of people are saying there's going to be a lot of, like, in the 2020s, we're going to see a lot of quarantine-based movies or whatever that's playing off that fear of isolation. But, I mean, like, we're already seeing that now with, like, brick films.
That's true. But, that is if we see any movies in the 2020s.
Yeah, you get the COVID 2029,
Oh, man.
But the funny thing is, like, for the brick filming community, being stuck at home actually is ideal. Because it means that we can actually brick film.
That makes sense. Although I feel like it's also important having your normal life is also, like, very important to just kind of recharge you for doing. You can't do the same thing for too long.
Yeah.
Essentially.
Yeah, I think
because we're people.
Oftentimes being away from it is one of the best motivators.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I kind of find with when I'm in university, is that I kind of don't really have the time or the patience, at least, to kind of, like, do both things. I think it's generally better just to give brickfilming a break for a while I'm in university. So it comes to, like, this time of year, and usually I'm very active within brickfilming, and once it goes back and once it circles around again and I get a break from university, I feel kind of refreshed and ready to start brickfilming again.
That's the thing about people. Sorry.
Go ahead.
Tell
us
that's
about
the thing about people. Okay, so no human is meant to do the same thing over and over and over again every day, day in, day out. Yet we're okay, I'm not going to go into this. This is too political for a Brick Filmer podcast.
Oh, we were about to get enlightened.
It's like, so you can't expect to do the same thing over and over because people get burned out. You get tired. You need constant breaks from literally everything, even things that people might perceive as fun. Why do you think the phrase "I need a vacation from this vacation" exists? Because you can't be doing the same thing over and over again.
Or too much of a good thing.
Exactly. But yet we're expected to do so, or die. And it's like, dog, are these really my only choices? All right, sorry about that. We can, like, go on with the rest of
being alive is kind of cringe, to be honest.
Oh man.
I think it's true. Like, you have to kind of, like, take a break from, not live too much by a routine, because I think there is also the danger of, like, you become too set in that routine that you never kind of move on in life.
Eventually you just go on autopilot.
Yeah. As much as you may enjoy being where you are now, like, do you want to kind of still be in the exact place that you are now in, like, 20 years, still being, like, the 20-year-olds that's brick filming, but, like, 40-year-olds, I don't know.
Although it's fine to, like, keep parts of your past prevalent, you also have to keep moving forward as a person.
Yeah. Like, for me, the way I look at the future, I mean, I kind of always want to have brick filming as part of my life, but I think having the kind of the breaks of like, this is a time where I'm going to be brick filming, and then I'll take a break from it. Is kind of a healthy way of living, I think. I know I'm saying this as someone who does a one brick film a week, so I don't know.
No, I mean, all of it, like, what you're saying is true. You gotta keep going, but you can't keep going doing the exact same thing. Otherwise, you'll go crazy. Or you'll just, go on autopilot, which is probably just as bad. Because then, at that point, you pretty much just stunt your growth as a person.
Yeah, you end up becoming The Simpsons.
Exactly, actually. That's a very eloquent way to put it. It's so metaphorical.
Oh yeah, so I guess going back, steering it slightly back to Lego Studios, because I've still got a bit more I could probably say. One of the things I was curious about is, did you actually get a chance to play around with the webcam?
I actually didn't. I didn't.
Oh.
I haven't tried it out. I mean, I was happy to be showing other people's stuff as the examples that I was using.
Oh, do you have a Lego Studio set of your own?
Yeah, I mean, most of the set footage that I show in my video, I recorded that myself very quickly.
Oh, like the puppetry and stuff?
Yeah.
Oh, the whole idea of puppetry and brick filming is actually something I did not know about until I watched your video. And that's actually like a really unique and interesting way to sort of showcase things, because it's not done too often nowadays, especially. I think the closest we get is, I'm reminded of Panta Hat in that one video he made, the Skyrim, where he like throws the Lego piece down.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's captured on video. And that's like kind of like puppetry. But we got to bring puppetry back.
Yeah, I feel like it had a negative connotation for many people, like as if it's just inherently the easy way out, even though it's often really hard to actually get the shot in live action.
You have to really set things up, yeah.
You're putting a lot of effort into something that people might think is you being lazy.
Exactly. But I've always liked doing that, like a lot of films I make have one or two obvious live action shots that are just funny looking, like in Parallel Panic.
That's the thing. The humor comes from the sort of like break in the motion.
It's like in SpongeBob. When
they do the thing when they go like above water, yeah.
Yeah, or there's like some extreme close up in a completely different art style.
There was that brick film that Sanjira did last year, Donut, which had a lot of like puppetry in it, which it kind of just added to the kind of absurdity of the brick film, and it really just had a lot of charm, I think.
And it's a great comedic look.
Yeah.
It really is funny to like sort of break up the pacing. It reminds me of this one brick film. I forget who it's from, but it's about a haircut. It's like a hair. I think it was a Thack, from this year. But they'd have they'd like zoom into the minifigure extremely close, and that would be like, and then like when they get close enough, they'd replace the entire minifigure by brick building it, and like they'd just snip off a piece of hair.
Oh yeah, I think Hoverfrog Films made that.
Oh, it's a great example of like, sort of changing the aesthetic in the middle of a film that really like lends itself to being funny. Like you said, SpongeBob does it a lot.
Yeah, I love the stuff people are doing with scales recently.
Brick filming as a whole, I like. It's been getting a lot more advanced. Mm-hmm. It's like we hit the industrial age or the industrial revolution.
I think that we got to a point now where most people are, at least to some degree, quite impressive, mm-hmm. and you kind of have to try and find new ways of being super impressive. And I don't know. There's a lot of like techniques.
Not so much super impressive, but novel.
Yeah, that's what. Yeah, like it's kind of just being kind of just unique, and I like brick films where they have a sort of technique where you just think, I never thought you could do that, or well, that's actually really clever,
Yeah.
I wonder if it's like a byproduct of like modern day internet culture, which is ironic because most of it is pretty much regurgitating like the same joke over and over again. But I find but the thing is, when you get to like the sort of really weird layers of it, where it's just throwing whatever on Photoshop and it just works, I think you can apply that same principle sort of applies to a lot of brick films today, in which a lot of people just have these really sort of out there concepts. They're sort of like, I don't want to say desensitized because that's not really the right word, but they're used to seeing so much of these really out of this world context or ideas because they're exposed to it so much more in this day and age.
I've been happy to see people appreciating films that might be like low frame rate or kind of janky, but you can see this real creativity regardless. Like it's shining through.
It's like it's a part of like what they're going for.
Yeah, but not even so much that, like they might just not be skilled yet, but you can still see that there's creativity going into it. And I feel like 10 years ago or more, the responses to BRICKFILMs it was always like, oh, the camera got bumped or the light is flickering. It was like you got the same few criticisms every single time, and it felt as if like people could only appreciate a BRICKFILM if you ironed out the camera bumps and ironed out the light flicker, and just a couple of these like rigid the same things over and over again. And it was like they wouldn't even consider the ideas in the film, but now people do more so. I think
that a little bit of imperfection sometimes you kind of just sort of just continue, just move on. Like I find quite often I'll accidentally bump the camera ever so slightly and I'll just ignore it.
Oh yeah.
It's like not the hardest thing to ignore. Because I think that's something you become desensitized to.
I think it's in a way it's kind of like if the animator is going to ignore it, then you do too.
I mean, I do try and like, if it's noticeable, I'll just try and fix it in Vegas. But it's not perfect. So, but
sometimes it can be too much.
I just kind of just doesn't bother me really. Like, it's just a little.
But thing. I think that's also something that we realize about each other as well is that we're not machines.
Yeah.
We're not going to make like 100% every time.
It's like how in stop motion you can see the fingerprints on the characters, and that's
like the dust particles.
Just part of knowing that like somebody actually made this.
It does add to the charm.
People like that human edge, don't they? I mean, one of the things I really like about Aardman is when they have real-world elements that are there. Well, like things like water is like thin pieces of plastic, that kind of things.
It kind of reminds me of the Benny and Lee BRICKFILMs, like the wall, the famous wall.
Yeah.
But like just having that human element that's like it doesn't look like it belongs, but that kind of like brings you back. Oh yeah, a real person made this, and that's what makes. I feel like that's what also makes brickfilming so much more appealing, is the fact that behind each of these projects is usually just one or two people.
I really like that the bricks of the Benny and Lee set have gotten more yellowed and filthy over time. I wouldn't ever clean them or replace them. But yeah, like that's part of. I prefer the look of Aardman stuff over Leica stuff, because Leica stuff seems to be, smoothed so far that it basically just looks like CG.
I mean, in a lot of ways, there is so much CG elements that it becomes, I guess, less human. Yeah.
I suppose. Although I do like Leica's art style much more.
I mean, I really like Leica as well. The style, but yeah,
I think. Like looking at things like Wallace and Gromit, although it's classic, there's something about making clay people. It can be very strange to make them look like appealing. Ironically enough, my sister's actually like has a phobia of stop motion animation, despite being a photographer. But she can literally never like I will try to get her to watch like The Night Before Christmas, and she's like, I can't watch this. This is scary. Turn it off. I'm like, but.
There is actually, there is a lot of people who genuinely don't like stop motion. Like, I think it's a lot of people kind of think it's kind of creepy.
It's that uncanny way they move sometimes, especially in older films.
Yeah, like there's like old children's programs from like the 50s and 60s and stuff like that, which they kind of
those
have that
creep me out.
Uncanny Valley kind of vibes. Yeah,
exactly.
Most things from like the 50s and 60s are kind of creepy anyway.
I suppose it is very different being a stop motion animator and seeing old stop motion stuff. Like if you watch like the 1933 King Kong, if you make stop motion, you're like, oh my god, this is amazing! They made this in 1933. But if you aren't a stop motion animator, you just feel like that's pretty janky.
But I mean, you also have to think of like the technology they had at the time.
Yeah.
It was crazy against their favor.
Of course, yeah.
There are some really, really old stop motion. I remember there's one from like Russia from like the 1910s. And the guy literally used like dead beetles.
Insects. Yeah, I've seen that.
Dead insects, yeah. Oh, and it's like, what am I watching? Like, and I'm like, this is fascinating, but I'm also like so creeped out. Like,
one of the people that I always find really fascinating is Ray Harryhausen.
Yeah.
I gotta Google who that is.
Come on.
I'm sorry, I don't know everything.
How are you gonna be a professional stop motion animator and not know Harryhausen?
At this point, you could be a professional anything, like, without knowing anything.
With Ray Harryhausen, I remember seeing this documentary where he was saying that there's like some things like monsters with like several heads, and he's got to animate each one differently with each frame and stuff, and there's no kind of like looking back at previous shots. He's just got to guess.
No live view.
Oh yeah, I think. Yeah,
Playback.
I think I animated that head the last frame, so I'm going to move it. You know, it's just like I could never imagine. You know, could you imagine ever being in that sort of situation? It's just.
That's what, I think that's like why a lot of older stop motions look like the way they do.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, because you can't really follow like animation basics when you literally do not have access to what you're doing until it's done.
I mean, it's like when you compare it to like hand-drawn animation, where you know it's kind of designed so that you can keep going back for the previous frame and you know that kind of stuff. Really, the sort of level that we hold sort of as like the standard has only really been that way for the last 30 years.
Yeah.
Essentially. It makes you wonder, like, could I pull all this stuff off if I was there in that time? You know, it's a very different, like, sort of like otherworldly time.
Yeah, but I think that's probably partly why stop motion has never kind of been as popular as the other forms of animations, because up until recently, there hasn't been really that kind of software to support the animation quality that people want.
Weirdly enough, I think people are actually starting to come around to it, though, because
Yeah.
as the technology is improving, people are starting to see, like, whoa, this is so cool. This all exists in real life. And that sort of aspect of it is really appealing to a lot of, I don't know what like, people who don't do this. I don't want to say normies. I don't want to say that word.
One of the things I really do like about Leica is that in the end credits of every film they do, they always have the behind the scenes. And I think for a lot of people who are casual viewers who may not even necessarily think about it, it's just really cool to think, oh wait, this is how they did it, you know? And they see these kind of like massive sets that they built and that kind of stuff, and it's just kind of like one of the things I find really fascinating is there's that model in Kubo the Two Strings, that giant skeleton, yeah, and it's like the size of a human.
Oh yeah, it's crazy. It was like 2 stories tall, apparently.
Yeah.
Or something like that. But that's the thing about stop motion, I think, is that people, just because the way it's sort of like, you know, created, people really appreciate it much more than other forms of animation, even though other forms of animation can arguably be much more difficult. Or not much more, but slightly more difficult.
I think the thing about stop motion is that it's like you understand how it's made.
Exactly. That's I think what it is. A lot of people who aren't really like versed in animation, they can see this and just be like, I can do this myself.
Yeah.
And it's that layer that really like lends itself to appreciation.
I think that's what people like so much about brick films, isn't it? Really, is that, you know, it's kind of like something you can do as a kid. You know, like I got all this Lego, I used to get a camera and I can just take photos. You know, it's just there's such an appealing thing about that, isn't there?
Well, evidently, or else we wouldn't be here now.
Yeah.
Especially like at this point when people are like really into movies as well, especially like young kids.
Yeah, and it seems like just in general, people are coming around again to, you know, they're kind of getting bored of CG, and now you can have stuff like the Mission Impossible movies marketing themselves on having done things for real.
Which, as they were, I mean, like, you know, as in with the first one, they were going on about how much CGI they were using. Now it's the opposite.
That's the thing. People need breaks, you know.
Yeah.
People need breaks.
So don't worry. So, you know, come 20 years, and everybody will be bragging about all the CGI again.
Oh man, 3D is gonna make a comeback.
3D always makes a comeback.
For like 2 years.
3D is like the cinematic cockroach.
Dude, 3D is like that toxic like X, you know? It's like, well, maybe it wasn't so bad, and you go back and it's like, no, it was that bad.
One of the things I was actually related to the video again, because you showed it. I was actually wondering, have we ever mentioned Wars of Darkness?
I don't think so.
Yeah, because I remember, I think it was like, it probably was about a year ago now, wasn't it? Then there were several of us on Discord, and we all kind of joint sort of watched the
4-hour brick film.
Yeah, so it's the longest known brick film in history, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I don't think many people would actually watch the entire thing, because it seems like such a daunting task. And it's quite funny, like, all watching it together, having that kind of... it's like the first reactions. You get to experience it together, you know?
Yeah, the thing was, I wanted to watch The Wars of Darkness in full so that I'd be able to talk about it in the video properly. But but at the same time, I didn't want to watch it because it was 4 hours long. But then I managed to find a couple other people who were willing to watch it live just for fun. And we were all basically dreading it. Like, we were going into it like, here we go, this is going to be terrible. But it wasn't. Like, we all really enjoyed watching it. And we're surprised by how inventive it was.
It's quite mad. Like, I can't imagine how long it must have taken. Did it take about a year?
Probably 2 years. Or maybe,
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I think he said somewhere.
Yeah, I think it was about 2 years. But then that would still mean that you were making like a 2-hour brick film in a year. So and then combine it. I just don't know how you'd. Yeah, and the funny thing is, like, so what you imagine with that kind of thing, like being 4 hours long, you imagine it's going to be really terrible, like the animation and stuff. But there's some really inventive like action sequences, and I think it does take about an hour to get actually good. But
it's quite the commitment when you're watching 7 FPS Lego Studios, but it does get good. But and Lego Studios was known, like the editing software was known to start crashing if you had a longer film, like 5 minutes or more. So you can imagine what 4 hours must have been like trying to edit it.
Just like going against technology at that time. That is actually a battle.
Yeah. And I mean, he's lucky it didn't just crash and delete everything just for the crack.
Oh my god, can you imagine getting all the way up to the finish line and that happening?
It happened to Smeagol. He made a film in 2002 called Legozilla that he finished it and just lost it.
Wow.
Well, I mean, like, at least he finished it.
Yeah, but like, it's not online or anything. It's completely lost. It was never posted online. That was a Lego Studios film.
That is tragic.
Yeah. Wow.
I think I just like quit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you just quit, wouldn't you? Just like, yeah. That would just be
Dude,
such
it's just like, what can you do? It's clear, like somebody on high is giving me a sign not to do this.
Yeah, yeah. I don't think I've ever lost anything extremely major, but I think if I did, like, I can't imagine redoing it.
Can you imagine, like, if you were tracking down the tapes for the finalists, right?
Yeah.
For years, you're telling me.
Yeah.
Can you imagine getting it? The guy's uploading it to Google Drive, and suddenly something horrible happens over at Google's end, completely deleting the file and the cassette tape for some reason.
For some mysterious reason. Well, I mean, at least in that case, there'd still be 8 other finalists who might eventually cough it up.
Possibly.
That's the good thing about them being sent on physical media, at least.
I guess, although physical media is just as,
Oh yeah,
like,
you could just
vulnerable.
die. Yeah.
I always kind of I find the concept of like having the only physical copy of something hugely terrifying.
Oh yeah.
Just like
God.
imagine holding in your hands. I don't know.
The plans for D-Day.
I mean, that's kind of like me with my collection of brick films, because like, what if my house burned down and the hard drives burned? Like, that's it,
They're not on any drive? They're on any Google Drives?
I mean, loads of them are, but like, I don't have this Google Drive. Google Drive is only like 15 gigabytes.
Yeah, that's right.
I don't know, but I've got.
Unless you want to like pay for the extra space.
I've got a hell of a lot more than that.
But like it's gonna take a long time to get through just like uploading them all anyway. So, but like, it's just a like, I don't know. Imagine if you had like, I don't know, someone gave you, this is the only copy of the first ever brick film, and it predates the, trip to the moon. You've got to kind of like, I don't know, just like you'd feel like you're just holding like the Holy Grail.
I feel like
that is essentially what it is. Yeah.
I'd at least project it and just like film the screen as it's projecting before trying to get like a proper transfer of it.
You have to get something. Yeah.
Yeah. Like my first priority would be to
thing.
save it somewhere else somehow and upload it.
Preservation.
No, sometimes like when I've done like a day's worth of animation, I'll and it'll be kind of like 2:00 in the morning or something, and I just feel like, I just want to go to bed and I don't want to, and you can't, you feel like you don't even want to just put the effort of just saving it onto the hard drive, but then suddenly you have this horrible thought that's going to keep you up all night, which is the thing of, what if my computer just dies?
Oh man.
And and then you have to put it on the drive then.
I feel like, considering I'm not the guest here, we should steer it back to more recent times.
Yeah, I know. I mean,
it's fine. Like, brick film history in general is just fascinating, because you're taking concepts that you weren't alive for, and it's like an entirely different world that is kind of possible to explore, but not really. But I mean, like, just thinking about how many brick films are really out there, just chilling. It's strange because you think, this is a niche sort of like medium, but yet there's such a like crazy history behind it.
That was the crazy thing to me in researching like the 70s and 80s stuff, because like very early on I'd been kind of thinking like, oh, here's the 7th ever brick film, stuff like that. But then in really researching it and finding like over over 50
it's
of
number
them,
9,000, bro.
but
yeah.
It's revealed like, oh, there was actually loads of people making random stuff, and most likely the vast majority of it is either completely lost or just in an attic or basement somewhere.
Yeah, that's crazy.
And it's funny because, like, from what we know of, it's like, Journey to the Moon is the very first brick film, but
that we know of.
But it's theoretically possible that there's an earlier one.
Yeah, but the thing is, like, with that, it's such an iconic film, and it's actually like one of the best early brick films.
Yeah, it is.
So, I think I remember you saying this in the past. Like, imagine if you did come across the first ever brick film from like 1969, and it was actually just like like 5
frames of a brick.
Yeah, it'd just be kind of like the most bittersweet like discovery.
It's just disappointing, yeah.
I really liked the idea of the first brick film being made in Denmark.
Yeah,
I guess that would make sense, right?
Well,
if anything, like the guy who made Legos probably did something with it.
I wouldn't say. I mean, it's hard to know, but by the 70s, it was well worldwide, popular worldwide, so it'd be just as likely anywhere.
I mean, because like you're looking back now, like to nearly 50 years ago, there's the chance that someone, as a child, played around and decided they wanted to do some stop motion with Lego is hugely possible prior to what we know as the first brick film. So yeah, so who knows, like, if we will ever come across, the first ever. But but again, it's such a long time ago now that the time to trace brick films from that kind of era is kind of like ticking, really.
You needed like a time machine or something.
That was a really good thing though about the Lego movie, is that seemed to get a lot of people to come out of the woodwork and show their old 70s and 80s brick films on YouTube.
Wait, that actually happened?
Yeah, like a lot of them are, only uploaded in 2014 or 2015.
That's something. Can you imagine like some like 50-year-old dude in like the theater just being inspired, like, oh my god, Mom!
I know it's actually true as well. Like, there's one brick film, I think it's the guy actually died like a couple of years after.
Oh yeah, Liftoff. He shared it. Well, first of all, he made it in 85, and he shared it online in 2000, but nobody really knew about it. And then he shared it online in 2014, and then he died in 2015. So that was some insane timing.
Yeah.
But again, yeah, it was weird because like he had this website for him sharing the film again, and it disappeared after 1 year, and I was just thinking like, why does that gone so fast? But like obviously he wasn't around to renew it. It's pretty insane stuff. Very unusual in brick filming, of course. So
I forgot like mortality.
Yeah, this
applied to brick filmers too. Like,
this podcast is getting pretty deep.
I know, it's like now we'll talk about philosophy.
Oh man.
But no, like, yeah, one of the things I always find quite interesting is like, because brick filming is all kind of within people's lifetime, the mortality side of things is never really something that's talked about much, and it's kind of mad to think of, like, I don't know, in like 20 years time, there's probably going to be a lot of brick filmers that are no longer around.
All right. Death as a concept is something that, although it's fun to like explore in films, actually thinking about it, it's kind of freaky. I don't know what it is about it, but it's like, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah. I guess it's kind of one of the interesting things about the community when it got to like into the brickfilms.com era, which I'm sure that you're going to sort of discuss more in the next video, Panta. It's like, it got to like 2001, 2002, a lot of films that had like deep and sort of dark kind of themes.
I guess that kind of reflects like the time as well, because the 2000s were pretty cringe in terms of like world events and stuff.
Yeah, but world events that are kind of both dark but also memes. Yeah.
Because I think like because we're getting to a point where we're getting so slapped in the face with just bad news constantly that the only way we can really deal with it is by making fun of it.
Yeah, that's true. But I think the thing was back then, like anyone using the internet, like I mean, like properly using the internet was an adult, so naturally, like
they were thinking about this kind of stuff.
Yeah, like they exactly like a lot of the people on brickfilms.com in 2001 were like in their 30s or late 20s, so it was a very different demographic.
Yeah, especially because now it's much more accessible to a lot of younger people, especially when you have like the rise of stuff like YouTube and TikTok. It's much more accessible.
Are there any TikTok brickfilmers?
There has to be. That's an episode of Brickfilm history coming in like 10 years.
I actually had to make a TikTok for like a university project, and basically it was one of these TikToks where you kind of like there's like different people throw like an object to each other and stuff, and I decided to do mine in stop motion. So I don't know if I'm the first person to do a Lego TikTok, but I doubt it.
I think I have seen a few like Lego TikToks. I've definitely seen some stop motion TikToks, like like Nino droids or the Figmas. There it's definitely like a genre there on that crazy wacky world.
Yeah, it feels completely impenetrable to me.
It feels
I like how we've gone from Lego Studios to existentialism and then TikTok.
the three main facets of life. But the thing about the weirdest thing about TikTok to me is that I feel like I'm on like the cusp of people who should be getting into it. I'm like just barely old enough to not get into it, but I'm also seeing people like around my age also getting into it, and it's like, this is strange.
I mean,
I don't understand it.
One of my friends in university, she's like obsessed with TikTok, and she has like like 30,000 followers or something crazy like that, and it's just like, I don't know. I mean, there are a lot of people who put a lot of effort into TikToks. Like,
some TikToks are really funny.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of like comedy skits, and I think
but Vine.
I don't know. There's a lot of cringe with Vine.
I mean,
like
everybody hated on Vine at the time, but most of the popular stuff I see from TikTok makes Vine look good.
Dude, Vine was a classic. It could just be because Vine was actually like my time. I was in high school and everybody had a Vine. But some of the Vines, like, they legit would kill me. TikTok never really had the same effect.
Yeah, I mean, I have seen some really funny ones, and and it's actually impressive the amount of information they pack into 6 seconds.
Into 6 seconds? That's the best part about it. I think it's because the 6 seconds forces people to be much more creative and to really get the punchline in.
Like with TikTok, yeah, there's so much cringe. Like every time I've gone on the app quite a few times, and every time I go on there, I just feel like, my face is just so kind of cringe mode. It's just like.
But I love when there's like a joke and like you just get the punchline. As soon as you get the idea of the joke, it cuts. Like.
Oh yeah,
there's like 2 frames.
You need
and
to keep it quick.
I hate it when something just goes on and on and on, and they just keep holding on.
That's to bring this back to Brickfilms. That's something I actually try. Like I found that in a few Brickfilms when I was getting back into the Brickfilming world. It's just one of those things where it kind of reminds you that you really just want to keep things constantly moving in a format like this.
You do, yeah.
Yeah, I guess to kind of because you're the guest and we should be talking about your videos. I'm
fine talking about anything we want to talk about. This is a fun conversation.
But like, I'm actually a big fan of like all your videos where you got like the it's in 60 seconds or variants of that, like the Spider-Man films. What's really funny about it is that you're doing that kind of thing of having to pack loads of scenes into very short, snappy kind of couple of seconds, and it's very quick, and I guess it's kind of almost like that, like Vine. It's that kind of.
Maybe it's the Vine influence taking over. Because I spent a lot of time on Vine when I was in high school. Maybe that's what nuked my my attention span.
I like the Sonic film from this
Oh
month.
man,
I do want to ask. Though, why did the Sonic film have to end on "It was all a dream"?
Because personally, I thought it was just too dark
Oh.
to go into that direction. You know, like there's bullying Sonic, and then there's really just being mean to him, and it's like I don't want to. Like,
I liked it.
I'm trying to like. It's hard to sort of keep a balance between having something like dark and funny or just mean spirited.
Yeah.
And I'm not really a big fan of like a lot of mean spirited stuff.
Yeah, neither am I. But I thought that one worked. I thought that you could have just cut it at 2 minutes.
Maybe who knows? I do like "It was all a dream," like the Biggie on the radio. And that's not the first time I actually used that either. I used that in a much older brick film of mine. Well, not that old. A Bone Chilling Tale. That was like the original one where it was like a horror until it was all a dream. And I think maybe it is kind of a cop out, because you want to. I kind of want to like be mindful of what like I'm sort of like bringing to people as well, because I guess videos have an influence at some point on the people who watch them, right?
Hmm. I never suggested that Sonic should have committed hate crimes in your video. just to clear that up.
It was implied that he fought in Vietnam, so maybe he committed a few war crimes. They're in the trees. But that video was a lot of fun to make because I got to sort of like go into a much more surrealist kind of view, especially towards the end.
I really like that aspect to it.
Because I guess like also when you're making something every week, you want to consistently like try and think of ideas that you haven't done before as well. And when you look at the title, who's faster, Sonic or the Flash? Who's the fastest thing alive?
You don't expect it to get to that place, yeah.
Exactly. And then all of a sudden, you're not even that fast! And then the video just changes. I think that's my favorite part of that video, too, is just the whole, like, it reminds me a lot of, you get what you friggin' deserve from Joker. Just the boom. I don't know if I can say the actual line here. So I censored it. But that video was a lot of fun to me. Sonic in general is a really fun character to work with because the sort of like modern day like reality of Sonic is just very like rooted in internet sort of bullying. So it's almost like his actual character doesn't matter. He can be whatever you want him to be because anybody will accept it because everybody just accepts the fact that Sonic is an anomaly. He's too fast to sort of anticipate.
He's always one step ahead.
I mean, it's stuff like it's why stuff like the Incredibles dub, except with Sonic characters, works so well. Even just his voice in general is so like malleable. Sonic is the Renaissance man.
I don't know if you ever watched like YouTube poops way back on YouTube.
I watched the very
Sonic
popular
Says.
ones.
I used to watch
That's
a lot
no
of that
good.
stuff.
It's like SpongeBob, kind of. Those characters are no longer necessarily the characters that were written. Instead, they're sort of like our vague perception of what we want them to be.
Yeah.
And working within that, there's so many possibilities.
A lot like what happens in your own brick films, and especially the grocery shopping brick film, which I was amazed when that came out and it was 7 minutes long.
I didn't expect it to be that long. I thought it was going to be like another like normal like 3-minute weekly one, and then I was like, this is so much. Why is it this much? But I was having fun making it. But it also kind of like speaks to sort of like what I was saying earlier about working too long on a project and how you can kind of get burnt out towards the end of it. Because towards the end of that one, I was definitely feeling that sort of like, I kind of want this to be done already. Although I definitely am happy with like the end product that came out with it. It was one of those things where it was like, I was like more relieved to be finished with it.
Do you know, it's funny, we take it for granted, but like a lot of us will complain about Brawl, and like, oh, that was a long week, but that's basically every week.
I think of it just like as just like a job, or like going to school. I've been going to school every day for every week of my life.
Yeah.
Or I've been having like I worked.
Yeah.
I mean, I worked at Amazon, man. That stuff changes you. It's like once you go through one of those nights in one of those factories in one of Bezos's labor camps, like it's just, it's like, yeah, you know what? I can pretty much do anything.
But yeah, it is true though. Like a lot of brick filmers know that in theory they could crank out a couple of minutes every week, or even like 2 minutes every day, going by what you can do during TAC. But you just feel like you'd never actually do it every week. At least I certainly
Well, I
don't.
mean, if you're gonna do it every day, then you just go absolutely insane.
People got like other obligations too, which kind of like keeps them from being able to work on something like this every day. Still, like, even a year in, I'm still like really enjoying this, and I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that it almost feels like I can just kind of like bring whatever I want to life, or say whatever I want to say. I think some of my videos definitely do have more of a message than others. Like Sonic, for example. What am I saying with that one? Kind of just fun to pick on Sonic for a bit. But the grocery shopping one obviously is more of a reactionary video, especially compared to current events and current day. And the meteor video especially was definitely the most heavy-handed one that I made in terms of views and current events.
Yeah, that was I don't know. It's kind of funny. I mean, I guess political brick films are not really something that really exists a lot, really. But that kind of
they're not really a thing. Although I'd like to see more of them.
It kind of wasn't like heavy-handed though. It was. I found it really funny.
It was like I just wanted to capture what I was seeing in real life, but like in this world.
Yeah.
And I also want to obviously, it's like you're kind of towing the line. It's like, do I make it biased? Maybe not, but I also want to say something with it. But it's like if you lean too hard into what you actually believe, then people are gonna be like, oh, this is biased or this isn't fair, blah 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 blah. But it's like, at the end of the day, like what we make is an extension of ourselves.
Yeah.
So we shouldn't be afraid to say what we want to say.
I mean, it's kind of crazy, but like even the brick film that I just made is controversial to a lot of people. There's a lot of people that be rallying against the idea of staying at home, but those people deserve to be ridiculed.
It's like, do you really think that the virus is gonna let you go because you're bored? It's so baffling to me.
It's just insane that people are just like feel that they've got something that's that important to do when.
Well, it's people in general. They don't react to like mass death like they do to a single like tragic death or a smaller scale tragic event. It's a strange phenomenon.
We're also in like this like age where every day, even before this pandemic hit, every day it was like, guess what crazy thing happened in the world today? Watch society collapse in real time on your nightmare rectangle. It's like, so like it was like the perfect storm. You desensitize most of society. You bring in this crazy split between modern viewpoints. And now you just got to introduce something killer, either World War III or a plague. Take your choice.
They're so used to the crazy news moving on every day that they're like, hey, why are you still talking about this virus? I'm bored of hearing about that.
But also as well, if I don't know, I guess a lot of deaths all happen at once and there's an entity to blame, I guess people are more into it then.
But to steer the conversation away once again, I've noticed that there's a lot of video game music in your films. So I have to ask, like, what are some of your favorite video games?
So I grew up on Nintendo games primarily. So
How old?
So I got a GameCube when I was in 2004, so I was about 5 years old then. And like the first game I pretty much remember playing was Ocarina of Time, because it came with like the Zelda bonus disc. It came with like Majora's Mask, Ocarina of Time, and 2 other games for the NES. And I became like a huge Nintendo fan off of that alone. Getting to Smash Bros, Melee, and just kind of like growing up, having their catalog of games consistently feed me my supply of video games. So I pretty much grew up exclusively on Nintendo games. But my favorite probably is Mother 3, which was the Japan-only game that never came out. But you can play it by getting a fan translation. And I think I liked it so much because everything about that game I think is like amazing. Like the music, I use so much of their music, of the game's music in my videos. And the story itself is like touching and moving. It's like about family.
Yeah, it's crazy, the story. I mean, I haven't actually played Mother 3. I've never tracked down a translation, but the story in Earthbound is, it's crazy how much more themes is packed into it than the average video game.
Oh yeah. But I also like, weirdly enough, I played a lot of Team Fortress 2 in high school, just like with my friends. And that was a lot of fun to play. So I used some Team Fortress 2 music in my videos, and even some sound effects. But most of the music does come from Nintendo games. And Smash Bros.
I've noticed a lot of Donkey Kong Country music in there.
Oh, Donkey Kong Country is also one of my favorites, like in my top 5.
Nice.
Just that whole series in general. I always go back to it.
I love DKC too.
I was like a gamer YouTuber at one point. You know, I was like doing Let's Plays in high school. And some of it was Donkey Kong Country. A lot of it was Mother 3.
That's cool, because, you know, like, you know, I was watching the videos and I just had this thought in the back of my mind, like, have you actually played Donkey Kong Country, like the old games?
Donkey Kong Country 2 is a masterpiece.
Yeah, it is. It's amazing. And it has a 10 out of 10 soundtrack.
It's perfect. It's chef's kiss.
I used some of that music in my studio's video, actually.
I do like the idea of using video game music in videos. It's quite often, I see it quite often in things, and I mean it's always quite funny whenever I see, because I'm not really as into games as you guys, but like I guess one of the games I always grew up with is the Simpsons Hit and Run, and
I love that one.
Yeah, whenever I watch a video and I hear like some of the music from that, I think, yes,
it's also like a connection that people form, you know, like it's almost like a shared experience.
Yeah.
I recognize that.
Yeah, it's kind of because it's such a niche, it's kind of like, you feel a sort of sense of, I don't know, it's like, oh yeah.
You feel seen, you know, you feel seen.
Yeah. You feel included.
It's also great for copyright smuggling.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of that stuff isn't in the system.
Until one day, I know the Nintendo ninjas they're gonna put out the whole claim, they're probably gonna arrest everybody. Or something, because their business practices are crazy.
Yeah,
but they make some great games.
That's true. Yeah, they never do anything like what anyone else does, which is, you know, good and bad. That they just always do their own Nintendo thing.
Yeah, somebody explained it great. It's like playing a Nintendo game is like eating at a really, really great restaurant, but somebody is screaming in your ear the entire time. It's like, the food's great. God, love the food. Could really do without this person screaming in my ear though.
Yeah, you just never know what they're going to do next. But I'm definitely looking forward to remastered Sunshine and Galaxy.
If that happens,
I hope so. I think is it confirmed or just rumored?
I think it's a rumor. But I love Sunshine too. You know, I think I think Super Mario Sunshine really actually impacted sort of like my visual taste. I love really clear, like the blue skies. That's kind of like why I chose the color that you see a lot of my videos. Where it's just like it's like very bright, high contrast, and high saturation, because I really love seeing like the colors pop.
Yeah.
It reminds you of summer for one thing, which in Canada we don't get enough of, and it both stimulates the visuals but also calms you down. It's weird. Yeah. It brings you to a different time. You are. Yes, and I'm glad it is. Nice. And I'm glad it is. People should not be going outside.
But I guess I didn't actually realize you were Canadian, so cool.
But yeah, I like having saturated colors as well, especially if the backgrounds are a bit more muted, and then your subject really pops.
Yeah,
it suits Lego, obviously.
Exactly, it's very good for Lego, especially. You know, they're already bright, colorful, and like they pop. That's also kind of like even with animation, when it comes to like the style. Again, I know we talked about this like 2 hours ago, but even when it comes like to the style, I like to really like make sure it complements the colors and stuff that I choose. It's also like why in the Sonic video as well, you kind of see towards the end, like it's important to like switch up the animation to really make sure it also syncs up with what you're trying to communicate. So when you see his hand shaking as like he tries to grab the flash hand, you know, you kind of have to take like different sort of like lengths to achieve that than what you're used to.
Mm-hmm.
This is a great podcast. I really enjoy watching these though when I'm animating myself.
That's good to hear. I know I certainly like listening to the BFG podcast when I'm animating.
Yeah, the Brickfilmers Go podcast.
Yeah.
I feel like when it comes to like brick films, there's many different types of sort of communities within this community as well.
Yeah, although I do feel like this is a good time at the moment where there's a lot more cross-community interaction and activity.
And I think with like, you know, things like Discord being so popular, that really helps.
Yeah, it does.
Because I know there are a lot of forum dudes, and I think forums are a bit before my time. I don't really understand how they work. It's like you can like put images, but only sometimes. It's very strange. But there's so much history in them, that's the thing.
There is, yeah, for sure. It's crazy now though to think about it. Like there was a time when I'd be on brickfilms.com and later Bricks in Motion, you know, just like all day refreshing the page just to see what the new posts were.
Hey, you know, actually, what do you think is like a few key differences between, you know, modern brick films and brick films from like 10 years ago?
The films or the community?
Both. And how they affect each other.
Well, I mean, I could talk about that all day.
Because that's the thing about brickfilm history, and that's kind of like, especially why I'm really excited to like, to see how the story is progressing, because now we're getting to the point where I was alive.
Oh yeah. Well,
and it's fun to see like sort of like just how different lenses perceive moments that that you were a part of.
when I eventually get to the videos after brickfilms.com, I plan to do a video that's simultaneously about the early years of YouTube and the early years of Bricks in Motion, with the crux of the video essentially being like brick filming being at its most divided, where you had all these things happening but they were completely separate and cut off from each other, and there was even some animosity between various sides.
That's something I remember hearing in the Forest Fire podcast, is that there were a lot of like people who were straight up just bullying him on the forums.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of big haters, all right. A funny thing about like when YouTube arrived on the scene, and certain brick films became popular even if they weren't as good as the best brick films. And like for a while, the people from the brickfilms.com community, or you felt like you shouldn't put the word Lego in your title. It felt like selling out. Whereas nowadays, the same people they have no problem with putting Lego in the title, or trying methods to get views on videos.
Weirdly enough, I don't like putting the word Lego in my titles.
That's interesting, alright.
I personally think it's because I don't want my videos to just be seen as just Lego videos.
Lego videos, yeah.
I want them to be like, it's like you have a medium. It should be taken as that, not a genre. And I feel like adding Lego into the title kind of like makes it into it kind of categorizes it in a way that might obstruct certain people from being interested in it.
Yeah, I mean, it's so tempting to put Lego in the title because it's going to get more views, but I feel like if you're lucky enough, or you make the videos well enough that you can break free from that, you might find yourself having your own fan base that's just there for your videos and the style and the humor that you bring to them. And they're not just Lego people. And I think you're achieving that.
Thank you for saying that. It's not something I was really trying to do. I think it was just whenever I make whatever I wanted to make, I particularly keep people around my age in mind the most. And I think that just happens to extend to people a little bit older than me and people a little bit younger than me. Because my generation is the best. No, I'm kidding. But I think it's also just because it's like weird because the whole cusper thing. It's like growing up in an age where the internet was really starting to get popular. But early life was kind of hard because I think we were talking about this earlier about the animosity and stuff. I'm going to say the S word, the Joker word. Society was in a very different place around 10 years ago, in which sort of like that really negative, sort of mean-spirited attitude was much more common.
It was actually, yeah. It wasn't just brick filming. Like it was the entire.
It was everywhere.
It was like
everywhere.
like the internet was 4chan.
You're kind of right. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like
everywhere you went, people were just waiting to get
they were
into
just
an
mean.
argument with you.
People were just mean.
Yeah.
I like not just brickfilming. Newgrounds, animators, YouTubers, everything. You get called the R word. You get called the F word. You get called the this word.
I think it was kind of the start of like the internet was kind of old enough for there to be like a second wave of people, like a second generation, and there was this sort of like snootiness of like I was here first, and like you almost have like the boomers of the internet.
Yeah.
The Karens.
And it's like, and I think now it's kind of like people are just a bit more kind of like accepting of that. I think
it's because the people my age are scarred by all of that, and we're just like we know how sucky it is to really have like a hit piece put out on you.
You want to break the cycle of abuse.
Yeah, it's like we all know what suffering feels like, so why should we make that our weapon?
But there's a funny Twitter account that posts like funny quotes from old posts online in like the late 80s and early 90s from news groups and stuff. And there's posts from people in like 1992 talking about like some development and availability of computers and internet and stuff. And it's like, oh great, now there's going to be a bunch of idiots who don't know anything coming on the internet.
The gatekeeping has really died down, which I'm happy to see.
I guess there is a kind of side of it where the world that we're in right now is really scary, and it's so messed up that people want some escape from that. So maybe, in a way, communities and the internet in general might end up being nicer.
Maybe.
Yeah, well, it already is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely, like, you know, even like seeing like what like teachers say about their students. They're saying like, you know, people from 2017 are much nicer than people in 2007. But people from 2017 are also generally more scared and anxious.
But you know what's actually worth mentioning, and this used to come up all the time, but like on the internet in general, but also particularly in brickfilming, because of certain, you know, types of people that attracted, it was like the opinion was essentially split down the middle as to like whether or not it was okay to be gay. You know, there was like rampant homophobia from like certain well, okay, mostly younger people. I mean, they a lot of them didn't know any better because they were just like brought up,
just like, you know, repeating
what
they heard.
Yeah, repeating what they heard. Most of the older people and like the people in charge, like they weren't, they didn't entertain any of these hateful ideas. You know, they were against them. They'd argue against them in the debate threads and stuff.
That's the thing. I don't think anybody who really said, you know, certain things back then. Again, you were young, and they were sort of like just kind of saying what they heard, without really giving it much thought.
Yeah. But nowadays, like, it wouldn't even be entertained. Like, back then it was, like, just a debate that just went on.
When you go onto the Bricks in Motion forums, there's always these old, like, controversial debate threads that haven't been active for, like, 10 years. It's all things like, there's that kind of iconic one is the gay debate, and, you know,
man.
And then there's like there's other fun ones like does God exist, and all these really fun, you know, non-controversial.
But that's what I mean. Like back then, and it wasn't just brickfilming, but looking back on it now, the idea that you could even debate things like that, it's kind of crazy.
Yeah, I know. It's just
it was just the whole idea of normalization really does make way for some really not good things.
Like nowadays, the standard is acceptance of people. Like as far as rules for websites go.
I guess that's kind of like for me. When I joined the community, maybe I kind of missed a lot of the worst, most toxic era, because I kind of got into the era where everybody was like, yeah, you know, I think this and you think that, and we all like each other. And it's kind of funny because it's like when I joined the community, I was quite young. I mean, I was 15. I was quite I wasn't really that on the internet all that much before then, and I'm quite glad that I didn't end up in certain forums or certain places that I could have ended up being, and the way I sort of thought I could have easily have gone down a different path. But luckily I joined a community that was very kind of accepting, and it kind of showed that to kind of like a certain extent there's people from very different sides of a spectrum that can kind of all have that kind of common ground and respect each other as human beings, and that really changed how I saw myself and how I saw people, and it's changed me completely as a person, really. That's Bricks and you know, the Brickfilms community has made me a better person in a lot of ways.
That's like it's very important, because that's a really scary thing about the internet nowadays, because there are a lot of like, you know, 13, 14, 15-year-olds who feel ostracized and who feel kind of alienated from their in real life crowds, right? So they go on the internet and they find, you know, these like, you know, they find these forums and they find these websites that have their common interests. And it's really important to make sure that those common interest websites are filled with people who, you know, bring good values and to bring, I guess, non-hateful values, because there are actually some sinister tactics used by people who actually have who actually have these hateful values to sort of infiltrate these communities and sort of normalize a lot of these toxic, bad ways of speaking, or just, you know, joking, as they call it. And it gets to the point where, you know, you say these jokes yourself to feel accepted. And you say them so much that it gets normalized, and then the whole rabbit hole leads into that, which is why I think it's like, you know, which is why I'm trying to be very mindful about the stuff I make too, is to make sure that, you know, you don't get certain ideas that are regressive to to human benefits.
Like if you want to know something about how like forum culture and stuff differed back then compared to how stuff is now, like back then you found a forum that was a common interest, but like the forum was where you posted literally everything. It was like every social media site rolled into one because social media sites weren't popular. So like people would discuss just every single topic under the sun, and they just post pictures of themselves in threads just for the sake of it.
Forums seem fun. I'm sad I missed out on forums.
So that kind of explains how there could be like these debate topics that just seem wild today. Because you can imagine if something happens today on social media, it happened back then on forums. So like, and that covers every topic, every type of discussion. And it would all happen on a forum for just one specific interest, because that was essentially everyone who was on there. That was their social media site.
I guess really the way that how toxic a community or whatever, or how untoxic a community can be, a lot of it is just by chance and just the founding people who kind of moderate and whatever. But I just think the way things ended up, the BRICKFILM community is just very lucky that it's a very accepting and a very nice community that's and I think a lot of impressionable kids of like 13 or whatever are joining a community which is beneficial for them, I guess, really. And
yeah,
it's
that's
nice,
what I think too.
with all the negativity that there is in the world and online, whatever, it's nice that
online especially.
Yeah,
especially.
At least there is like this forum and stuff which attracts a younger audience that actually is nice.
That's what I'm really like happy to see about the BRICKFILM community, especially, is because a lot of them, you guys especially, are just very welcoming, very nice, and very helpful. Especially, you guys don't tear down like a new person's submission. You don't like rack it to pieces. It's just acceptance, and you try to provide criticism in the best way you possibly can, while also trying to keep their feelings in mind.
Yeah.
You either die a wholesome content creator, or you live long enough to see yourself have a heated gamer moment. One of those two.
Well, of course, I feel like mentioning like back then when I was like 13 or 14 or something. If somebody showed up in the chat and they were looking for a evolution debate, I was like, oh my god, yes, somebody I control.
When it comes to the community and stuff, I always think it's good to kind of try and be as positive as possible, and try and be as like helpful as possible to people. And like my role model, it like in life generally, is like Mr. Rogers, and I want to be like the Mr. Rogers of brickfilming.
Dude, that's exactly who I was thinking of. Have you seen the documentary, Won't You Be My Neighbor?
I haven't actually, no.
Oh, it's so good. It's amazing. Came out in 2018. I watched it like twice. I watched it with my mom and sister, and I watched it with my girlfriend. It was like the perfect like moment. But it really does bring about a perspective that I think is very important for people who have large audiences to consider. It's like a power, you have to really wield it responsibly.
Just to be clear, I mean, I don't think I'm like, I don't want to pretend that I think I'm like, this amazing, humble person, but that's who that's what I want to be. That's what I always strive to be, I guess.
That's the thing too, right? It's like, it's not necessarily you as a person, but you have to kind of put up a perception.
Yeah.
Because no matter what, the person will never be able to live up to whoever you think of whenever you think of that person. Because we're people, we have flaws, we make mistakes. But it's like a legend almost. The legend of MLK or something.
Strive to become the MLK of brickfilming.
But unironically though.
Okay, should we actually head over to the BRICKFILM showcase?
Oh yeah.
Oh, cool, yeah. So, for anyone new to the podcast, this segment is just an opportunity for each of us to talk about brick films that either mean a lot to us or just brick films that we want to talk about in general. So for this particular episode, we wanted to each pick a brick film that had the themes of isolation, as we felt that it was quite topical for everything that's going on right now. So I picked Alone, which is a 2002 brick film by Jason Rowald. And this actually did feature briefly in Penta's video, as well as being kind of, it kind of goes with what's going on at the moment, sort of self-isolation and, and it's kind of like, I guess, an early example of the white expanse sort of brick film. Conceptually, it is quite a dark film. It's, kind of like it's got some horror sort of themes. And yeah, just overall, it's just a quite interesting film. It's quite, I guess some of the sound effects are very Lego Studios, I guess, I'm going to assume.
I hear those sound effects were crazy.
So some of the sound effects are somewhat humorous, but there is certain parts of sound design I do like. I like I was listening to it earlier on my headphones, and I like the heartbeat sort of like that goes on throughout the video, and it gets sort of more and more intense as the video kind of goes on. There aren't that many horror brick films out there, so I guess it's kind of a good example of a horror brick film.
I really love, like, it's almost like you know the time that it came from, like 2002, and you can see a lot of that in sort of just like the presentation, which makes sense because technology at the time. But I really love how that almost like it like really adds to that, to the feeling that it gives, like the sort of like horror isolation feeling.
Yeah, actually, that was something I brought up in my studios video, was like low resolution kind of adding to horror brick films.
It really lends a hand.
Of course, this isn't actually studios, but it's still RM compression was really bad. But yeah, I'd agree that it's like a bit on the comedic sort of goofy side at points. Like the Lego skull print is just inherently goofy.
It is funny. It's fun to look at.
Yeah, but yeah, there are definitely some good moments and shots, like the first person shot and the over the shoulder shot. They seem to have really good presence.
All the ripple effects and stuff. It's very like 2002 Windows Movie Maker effect stuff. But even like seeing the stuff like the skulls flying by, like when like the actual skulls, not the Lego skulls. Just like with the resolution and sort of graininess, it kind of gives that surreal kind of feeling.
Yeah, I just like the because you've got the sort of white expanse part, and then it goes quite dark, and I don't know. I just think it's very suspenseful film. It kind of builds up the tension. I think both in the sound design and visually, it's quite an ambitious film.
Yeah, even just like that shot of him going through the door, or like just looking into the door and seeing the skulls.
Yeah, I mean, looking at this perspective of someone, like if I was watching it in 2002, I imagine this would have been a quite impressive brick film visually.
It makes for a good segue into my pick, which is Melodramedy by Robinson Wood, also known as Nosnoboris. I'm not sure if that's the right way to pronounce it, but it's the way I've always said it. And so this is rather than being in an all-white room, it's a guy in an all-black room. And this is a 24-hour animation contest 2 film from 2006.
Oh, it came in third.
Yeah, it should have won the Audience Choice Award as well, which was a thing back then. But it was disqualified because Nosnoboris didn't submit a ballot himself. And I guess that was a requirement for entrance.
You have to vote or it doesn't count.
So even though it came third in the judge's choice, I think it's probably my favourite film of Tech 2. Back to School Nightmare is an absolute classic that I watched a million times in 2007. But I reckon Melodramedy is like, it works well as a full short film. More so than the two ahead of it, Back to School Nightmare and Negotiations. They're kind of long and talky. I mean, it probably impressed people at the time that they were long, like 3 minutes long, because at the time people didn't know the limits of tech, and there was a lot of like one-shot films, 45-second films and stuff. But I feel like Melodramedy is a really good example of a great tech film.
Yes, I mean,
you know what I mean?
Oh, it's perfect. It's just like the one room and the keyhole build.
Yeah. But I feel like it works as a short narrative as well. Although it's really funny, like he looks at the keyhole and it looks like it's the size of a doorway. And I mean, I guess it's meant to be like he's exaggerating how he's imagining it. But like when it cuts to the shot at the end and you see the door from the other side and it has a small keyhole.
So small.
It feels like the guy is like the size of Tinkerbell or something. He's just in there on like a tiny shelf.
Also, the face choice for the guy on the other side of the door is classic.
Yeah, it's a classic face.
That is funny, actually. I hadn't thought about it, but yeah, I'm watching it again now, and I can see there's like the giant keyhole. Yeah, that is funny. There is a kind of, I guess maybe more now, because Radiohead is kind of is sort of a bit of a meme. I kind of get that kind of vibe from it.
I don't know. There's a difference between this choice of Radiohead and, you know, something like Karma Police and Dane Cook films.
I guess so. Yeah.
Though the song is actually like really good. It got me to Shazam it. That's a
It
rarity.
suits the mood.
And just to be clear, I like Radiohead. Like, I'm not.
Okay.
I'm not dissing them.
I like Radiohead not because of this.
I was gonna say that we should describe what the film is about, but I think it's one of those films where it's best if you just
watch it. Yeah, you can't really describe it.
Yeah. Like the more you know, then you shouldn't know a lot going into it. Just know that it's a good tech film, and yeah, it's definitely worth keeping in mind if you're trying to think of how to make a brick film in a short amount of time, but make it interesting and memorable.
I mean, I think there's always this thing with with the brick film showcase, like when you're talking about a brick film which is only like a minute and a half long, you don't really want to go on to like with a massive monologue about how good it is. So I think it's always quite good if we don't say too much of it, because it's, I mean, again, these brick films are always just worth watching for yourself, aren't they? And I just think it's a really interesting brick film. Yeah.
It's also worth keeping an eye out for the old school mod element implementation, where you just write it on a piece of paper and just tape it to the Lego.
The E.
Yeah, there's like a whole bunch of different printed E's in different fonts stuck on his shoulder.
It's funny how like in 2007 the letter E didn't mean anything, but now it's just Markiplier.
It's just the whole film is E.
And the key, I really love the keyhole build. I really love the way the light shines through it.
Yeah,
that's the thing about like, I mean, like you can tell there's some overhead lighting too, but it's not enough to really distract from the keyhole.
I actually like the lamp hanging from a like implied ceiling. That's pretty rare for the time.
It's like brick built
the
clouds.
End. Yeah. Yeah, it's one of those things where if you imply a ceiling, your film instantly becomes cool.
Yeah, trying to work out like how best to sort of do that is always kind of fun. I tried doing it a bit actually, but yeah, it's always quite a difficult thing to do. Generally, a lot of films just have like that one shot.
Well, what I've been doing in Taco Trouble 2 is I've got a decent number of shots where you can see just a small bit of the ceiling, like just at the edge, and then there's all these hanging lamps that are, of course, implied to be hanging from the ceiling, so it feels like a huge ceiling, even though I'm only showing a small bit of it at any one time. So I feel like that goes a long way, and that's sort of like what's in this film is a lamp hanging from what you would imagine to be a ceiling.
So yeah, should we go over to your pick, Edbound?
By the Sad Sea Waves by Twick a Brick. Which kind of like goes, like you were saying, this went along with the isolation theme that we had going on. One thing, I really like the setting. For one thing, I really love the ocean. Just like sort of like the being out at sea and stuff. It's like a fantasy that I had never really actually had because I've never been on a ship before or even out of my country. But I really like sort of like how they took this, concept that I think is kind of like romanticized. But they really added like an element of fear and how it would actually be. Especially when you kind of add the idea that he's alone on the ship, but not really alone because he's like surrounded by I'm assuming those are his old crewmates, and that they're like infected by something, and he has to escape them somehow. But where can he escape to? He's on a ship, isolated. And I think like the concept of that, it's fun. But I think what really makes this brick film amazing is the poem. The poem aspect of it is something I really want to see a lot more in brick films. It's sort of like have like either like a poem or like words, narration that kind of like has something to say. And I was talking about this again earlier, is I would really like to see something like this, except with something like In Flanders Fields, like the famous anti-war poem, because like this kind of concept where you very much have something to say, along with narration that's powerful, can really create something that's impactful.
With every Twick a Brick film, there's so much to admire. Like pretty much every shot, you can look at just everything and just sort of like admire the set design, the cinematography, the animation.
The set design, especially in these, is something else. Truly, I cannot believe how they were able to do all this.
Twick a Brick has such an aesthetic of like
That's true.
Of brown, like brown, that kind of sort of warm. Well, it's sort of like sort of warmish colours, but kind of
muted at the same time.
Yeah, sort of muted. Um,
And it's funny because like I kind of always thought that the recognizable look of their films came from the fact that they kept on using the 4000, but even in switching to a DSLR, it stays looking like Brick films.
I think a lot of it has to do with like just the color correction as well, or the color grading.
Whenever there's a brawler attack, I always watch the playlist like on a TV, and so I can't see who actually made the film because it's full screen. They automatically play the next one. But every time a Brick film comes up, within about 2 seconds, I'm like, oh, this is Twick.
I love having that sort of like really just recognizable stamp on everything you make.
I like that they do these shots that are like centered with a sort of basic shape structure. You know, like in this, there's the shot where he's climbing up the broken window, this big rectangular window frame with the light coming in from outside. They've done other similar shots to that. Looks really nice.
And even just like the movement as well.
Oh yeah.
Is like the style of animation is perfect for what they're accomplishing. It's so weird, but Twickabrick, it's almost like whenever I see his films, I don't see Lego. I don't see like the whole brick aspect of it, even though it's the medium. But it's like you see like through that, and you get exactly what he's trying to say.
Yeah, I get that. I mean, like, it's funny. Their style of animation is kind of like, it's the anti-cartoon.
Exactly, yeah.
But then it's a perfect example of that style of animation being used for
Being used well.
Yeah. And like I said at the very beginning, it's kind of like you need to have, there needs to be a purpose for your style of animation, and I don't think the smooth look necessarily works in a lot of brick films, depending on the style, but that look really works perfectly for their film.
Yeah, it's like these with this, it's not, you said it's about the anti-cartoon, and when like anti-cartoon is just humanity, and that's what he really accomplishes.
Yeah. I know, like, when I watched the quiz, I was basically thinking, like, I didn't even know you could move the minifigures in this tiny of an increment.
Oh, that must be so like, getting those movements has to be some type of precision,
I mean, it seemed like wizardry watching the quiz.
You gotta, like, really pinch your fingers for it.
But I've been inspired by their stuff in the recent animation I've done. Like, I've been trying to do similar kind of really small movements of the figures. I like it as well.
This is what they do in a week. This is a brawl, and regardless of like when like the time limit, the like the contest, like I think of Thack is the same. Like their style of animation, they don't compromise on it. It always seems like they've put that effort into every film they make. It's always there, that quality. Obviously when it comes to Thack, they quite often have like this sort of shorter but highly polished kind of sort of sequence, whereas when it comes to Brawl, they have a much more kind of realized, they have the room to really just make something that's just amazing. And
of course it's worth mentioning that they just won the Easter contest with a great entry.
Oh, did that?
But
is it?
Once again, we're off on a tangent talking about everything except the film that we're supposed to be talking about.
I feel
the film and the filmmaker.
I feel really bad because when it comes to Easter contest, I never seem to be around when they take place, and I had no idea that they won this contest. Okay, I need to binge watch the Easter contest films now.
But yeah, by the Sad Sea Wave. I probably said it when we did the Brawl podcast, but yeah, it has great sound design as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
that's worth mentioning. Yeah, oftentimes it falls by the wayside during Brawl. It has for me at least.
And the acting as well, for the narration.
That's true.
That's the thing, like there's so much potential in this sort of style to really make incredibly impacting brick films.
Yeah, it's certainly a good example of a brick film that's worth studying.
Mm-hmm.
Inspirational.
I just think that there's so much you can learn from Brick, even from like the earlier videos. I think one of my favourite videos of theirs is that film they did in 2010. The one in the cave. I've forgotten.
The Final Quest.
Final Quest, yeah. Like again, it's just that animation style is perfected already by that point, and yet they could just somehow continue to innovate and just make amazing stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to know what was their influence for animation, because yeah, it seems like around that time, like 2010, they did a couple of animation challenge entries, which was like sort of the first point at which their animation was next level. The one climbing a rock face, like I remember that, you know, back then the animation challenge in Bricks in Motion was a pretty big deal, and when they released the rock climbing one, you know, that turned a lot of people's heads.
It's crazy, yeah. Like, it gets to the point where you refine one thing about your animation or about your film, and just seeing how much higher they can still climb is like, what the heck? Are you human?
I mean, it's like, if you try to sort of like make me choose, like, you know, say what is the best, like, you know, trick or brick film and stuff, I'd be like, well, obviously it's this one. And then I'll be like, wait, but then it's like, what about this one? It's like every brick film that they've made in the last 10 years is the best brick film they've ever made.
That's the thing. It's like they all have so much impact. They all mean something, you know, depending on who you are.
I mean, like, again, another one that you could easily forget about, like, when it comes to all the other ones, but again, it's just like absolutely amazing film, is the Taste of Victory. Like,
yeah, that's great.
And the special effects, the effects they use in that, it's just like
the brick build effects.
Yeah, like, well, I mean, the rain effect is like, I'd never seen anything like that, and it's just so effective.
I've barely seen anyone use anything like it since, really.
Yeah.
I want to be this animator when I grow up.
But yeah, something you briefly mentioned there, I was like, are they even human? That's how I felt watching the animation in the quiz and certain other films.
It just
seems like wizardry. Yeah.
And it's just like, it's what I really love about it is like, it's that human aspect to it, you know?
Yeah, they've probably nailed realistic animation. I don't want to say better than anyone, but as good as anyone.
No hierarchies here.
No. Well, I mean, there's a couple of other people who I'd consider to be on that, like, a similar top level.
Like, Zach Macias.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And Dylan Woodley and Sean Willits. They're all incredible.
Yeah, Sean Willits is also, like, another brick filmer who's incredible. I grew up watching him.
Yeah, I mean, Sean Willits, he's another great example of that. And, you know, it's kind of funny with, like the first films in the Tim and Fred series, you know, they're still good, but they're kind of like they're kind of maybe, so I guess,
they're like the prototype.
Yeah, and you got like the Halloween episode, and it's just like amazing. Like the animation is just like, how did you get from there to there? It's just like, yeah,
you know, like, it's crazy. Like, I love, like, you know, going through a lot of these people's catalogs, because you can kind of see, like, when they make some of their breakthroughs, or like whenever they get over like a certain like mental block that they've had, and it's like growth. We love to see it,
and it's funny because it always seems to be with anyone, like, they get to that eureka moment and they make that brick film that defines them, and they just keep growing from there, and it's just like there's a sudden like point.
Well, it seems we've gone from talking about Twick's entire filmography to every brick film ever made.
How many do you think there are?
I could never guess.
Let's discuss them all. and then with each one we have to go on like a massive tangent.
But I mean, there must be literally millions of brick films.
The most intellectual conversation on the planet.
I mean, well, there might be as many brick films as there are films.
There actually might be, considering how accessible it is. Yeah. I mean, technically, brick films are films, so when you have that applying, but I think brick
I feel like this whole podcast, we've been like, have you ever seen that YouTube thumbnail of like 3 kids sitting around?
Exactly, that's exactly what I was thinking.
It's like, is Fortnite going downhill or something?
This whole time, that image was just in my mind, because that one kid in the middle looks so smug, but also looks like he knows exactly what he's talking about, which is, it's amazing. Joe Rogan, who?
Well, yeah, it's been, I guess this is probably a point where we wrap up.
This has legit been like a really like fun time.
Oh yeah, it's been, I loved it, yeah. I mean,
yeah, this has been great.
I don't know, it's generally, we always seem to find so much to talk about, and we always just like end up just having to kind of stop ourselves from just continuing forever.
Yeah.
Honestly. But yeah, I mean, it's just been really a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's been great to have you on.
Thank you. It was great to be on. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's like, yeah, what you do is just is amazing. Like earlier, before we were getting ready to start, I was going through like your earliest films, and they're on your YouTube channel, and you're actually the first person whose YouTube channel is actually newer than the podcast itself. And yeah, I regard everyone that's been on this podcast as a brick filming legend, and for you to be here right now, I mean, that says a lot about how much you've achieved, I guess, in, you know, under 2 years.
Yeah, some of it, I want to say some of it's like, it's luck, because, you know, YouTube can be really tricky and finicky. But it's like, there's always going to be opportunity. And it's important to also recognize, like, I've been on the internet now for 10 years, or more than that. And so, having that initial spark of momentum, like, being able to, like, figure out how to, like, capture that in a bottle, kind of, is really important if this is something that you'd like to do. You know, constantly, right? I was actually fortunate enough when the Solid Snake videos Dummy Thick went, like, you know, started going around, that I actually had a previous experience with something going around that I made that I wasn't able to actually, you know, harness. And I guess that's the thing with, like, you know, with people my age, is like, you know, oh, you gotta monetize or you gotta capitalize on everything, blah, blah, blah. A couple years ago in 2018, I made a tweet that went, like, crazy viral. I'd read it out loud, but I don't think it's like appropriate. And that went everywhere. And I was like, this is crazy. And I got like 2,000 followers from that, but I wasn't able to keep the consistency. I wasn't able to like keep up the momentum. And I'm like, well, that's not good, you know? But when that happened again with the Solid Snake is Dummy Thick, I was like, okay, you know, learn from your mistakes. And understand what is something that I like seeing from people who I just sort of come across. And one of the most important things I think is like, you know, the consistency, but also sort of like the rapidness, and being able to like sort of like work within that is kind of vital to keeping yourself alive. It's like swimming, you know, you got to keep moving your arms to keep your head above the water.
Yeah, that's quite good. That's a good sort of metaphor for it. But as well, I think it's like, what's the most important thing? I think, you know, you make a brick film like once a week, but there always seems to be that uniqueness with each video you make, and I feel like you're not just like making the same thing every week. You're kind of, I feel that I can feel that there's a real passion there and a real kind of joy.
I really like doing this.
Yeah, and I think that's hugely important if you're doing something that regularly. You know?
I think it is very like as well, because you know you have to remember people are like smart as hell nowadays. Like everybody's smart.
So, well,
you can't get by.
You can't fool them.
You can't get by on just sort of like, you know, shoveling things out. Because, and that's also, I don't want to be somebody who just shovels things out either. I want to be able to like sort of facilitate aspects of my own personality into my films. And that's why you have some aspects or some of my videos that have something more to say, like the grocery store one, for example. And other times where I'm kind of like burnt out on constantly being aware of how shitty the world is, you know, just have fun with it. You know, just have like, you know, just, you know,
sometimes you have to
bully Sonic. And being able to incorporate the things that I really like into these films also really help with that. You know, like stuff like the video games that I play that mean a lot to me, or the music. Especially, I think music is also a really important aspect, because like sometimes you can come across a song and you're like, oh my god, the song is incredible, and you just like automatically just start imagining how you would envision this as a video without even thinking about it. Because like sometimes the music can be that moving that you can just see a scene.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's like the basis of you know, a few of my projects have been like, I've listened to that a piece of music and I just thought, well, yeah, now like I don't need like even a storyboard or anything. I can just base the thing on that. You know? Yeah, if we start talking music, this could be a 5-hour long podcast.
I love music. I love all types of music. Every song I've ever listened to is a banger, except that's not true.
Well, let's save it for our music spin-off podcast.
Yeah.
I think there's one thing I would like to say is that I think the most important thing about keeping yourself, you know, you either die a wholesome content creator or live long enough to see yourself become a gamer moment. It's just, you have to stay away from being put on autopilot. And I think there was a moment in my life, like around a couple years ago, like right before I started doing this, where I found myself pretty much heavily on autopilot. I was in film school and I wasn't happy. You know, I wasn't happy with my current relationships with my family and friends. And just generally, like, a lot of that. And, like, you know, when it comes to a point where it gets pretty just unfulfilling, you kind of have to, like, really look at what you're doing, why you're doing it, and what makes you happy and what doesn't. And you kind of have to really try and stick to what does make you happy.
I mean, that's true. I mean, like, you know, you get so
set on a routine, even if you aren't happy with that routine, you're just so used to it that getting out of that can be really hard. Sometimes you have to.
It almost seems impossible.
Yeah, sometimes you have to just make this sort of like tough decision and think, yeah, right, I gotta do this in order to just change that routine. Yeah, absolutely.
Sometimes though you can't do it all at once. Sometimes like if you find yourself stuck, you have to really take all the time you can to yourself to incrementally work on your actual passion until you find it gets to a point where you're able to jump ship and be like, all right, let's get cracking.
Well, I think that we should practice what we preach and actually end the podcast.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry.
No, I mean that was a perfect ending. Yeah.
Thank you again for having me.
Yeah, thank you.
It's been a real pleasure.
Yeah, same.
Thanks.